It was August 17th, 2035, marking exactly 5 years since the great global catastrophe. From that day on, monsters had emerged everywhere, hunting down anything that moved and reducing humanity to nothing more than prey. Perched atop a building, a young man sat in hiding. Despite the constant danger, about 40% of the population had managed to survive, allegedly due to the protection of awakened workers. To kill time, the boy listened to a broadcast on his phone where the announcer dismissed the awakened, arguing instead that reinforced alloy walls were the real reason humanity was still alive. Disturbed by noises from the street, the boy stood up to investigate. A quick glance revealed monsters roaming below, 1 Class A creature and 6 above-average Class C beasts, exactly confirming Jichel's prediction. He grabbed his binoculars to scan the area and focused his attention on a nearby vacant parking lot. He mused that the situation was about to get serious. Suddenly, yellow lightning struck the empty lot. The boy smiled, recognizing the phenomenon as a sudden gate. As a passage began to form within the beams of light, he recalled hearing that people typically emerged from these portals. Sure enough, a man leaped through the light, landing safely with his arms crossed over his face for protection. Keeping his eyes closed, the traveler exclaimed that he had finally returned, throwing his hands up in celebration. However, the commotion immediately drew the attention of the nearby monsters, who charged toward him. Grimacing, the newcomer realized he was in trouble the moment he arrived. He spotted a creature resembling a demonic octopus and questioned why such a monster was present. From the roof, the boy watched through his binoculars with a knowing smile. He had anticipated this. As a green beast prepared a massive attack against the traveler, the observer noted that it had finally started. As the fight wore on, the traveler sustained injuries. The watcher on the roof thought to himself that defeating a high-level Class C monster usually required a team of at least 10 elite hunters. Just then, the man unleashed a technique known as the Crayola swords, sending thousands of light blades flying at the beast. Guided by his hand movements, the projectile struck various parts of the creature's body. The protagonist observed that the stranger had managed to eliminate 6 monsters in a single hour, entirely on his own. Now, only the Class A monster remained. A beast that supposedly couldn't be defeated, even if all the Class A hunters in the world united. Smiling, the curious boy remarked that hearing stories was one thing, but witnessing a copy master in action was a completely different experience. Taking advantage of the moment, the creature launched a lethal strike that caused the time traveler's eyes to widen in shock. Watching from the sidelines, the protagonist told himself he just needed to wait a little longer before that power became his. Meanwhile, the copy master managed to dodge the attack by taking to the air. Amidst bursts of light, he prepared a counterattack, activating his ghost sprint ability, followed immediately by the demonic blade. Moving in a zigzag pattern, he delivered countless cuts to the enemy. With this stunning move, the man successfully brought the monster down. Through his binoculars, the excited boy remarked that the battle had been beyond comprehension. However, seeing the hunter collapse alongside the beast, he knew it was time to act. As he approached, the boy realized that events were unfolding exactly as Kai Chul-hyung had predicted. He reached out to the fallen stranger, asking if he was okay, while recalling the tip he had received. Saving this man was the key to gaining his power. The situation, however, was dire. The man on the ground began coughing up blood. Unsure of how to assist, the boy hesitated until the wounded traveler opened his eyes and asked for the current year. When the boy replied that it was August 2035, the man struggled to sit up, explaining that while only 5 years had passed here, he had spent 30 years in the other dimension. The protagonist urged him to lie back down and rest, but the traveler insisted it was too late. Observing the man's condition, the boy silently realized he wouldn't survive the day. Filled with regret, the traveler admitted he had exhausted too much energy just opening the portal. Seeing the boy's somber expression, the hunter made a final request. He handed over a photograph and asked the young man to find his family and look after them if they were still alive. The protagonist broke into a cold sweat, confessing that he wasn't in a position to take care of anyone. However, the dying man clarified that it wouldn't be for free. He offered to transfer his power in exchange for the favor, asking only for the boy's name to begin the process. It turns out that in this apocalyptic world, the protagonist's life was defined by 2 recurring themes. The story shifts to one of these moments in June 2058, where the boy, now identified as Choi Jun-hyuk, lay on the ground with a severe abdominal wound. Standing over him, an armored blonde man mocked him, telling him to stop squirming like an eel and noting that they had finally met. Realizing escape was impossible, Jun-hyuk asked who had revealed his location. The villain grinned maliciously, admitting that Jinsu had betrayed him for $1 million and a promise of safety. Enraged by this revelation, Huck cursed the traitor. The man gripped his sword, announcing that since he had finally obtained the answers he sought, he was ready to conclude his business. However, these words triggered a sense of familiarity in the protagonist. Seizing a glowing object known as the regression stone, the boy declared that this artifact had given him a way to reverse his fate. The villain didn't react immediately as the item was taken, but his eyes widened in realization when the boy identified the stone. Although he quickly ordered his henchmen to intervene, it was too late. A blinding light began to engulf the area. With a smile, the boy bid them farewell, vowing to find Jonathan Curtis in the past. During the temporal journey, the traveler's only wish was to return to a time before his siblings had died. His plan succeeded, transporting him 23 years back. Although the world was still on the brink of collapse, he was now in the presence of the traveler who had promised to transfer his power. As they shook hands to initiate the process, the protagonist told himself that this time, the outcome would be different. A powerful wind picked up as a system notification asked the donor if he wished for his body to vanish once the procedure was complete. Accepting his fate as a dying man, he agreed to the terms while his abilities began flowing into the protagonist. However, when the transfer reached 20%, the man on the ground warned the boy to stay alert, explaining that any interruption could still abort the process. Right on cue, a massive creature loomed behind the young man, putting him in a perilous situation. The hunter, identified as Park Kang-ho, laughed bitterly at the chaos, noting that the monster was the same one he thought he had already killed. He remarked that while characters in novels usually get happy endings, reality was far messier. Realizing he was incapacitated, he urged the boy to abandon the power transfer and flee immediately, advising Hyuk to simply adapt and survive since there was nothing else to be done. Instead of running, the boy surprised the hunter by grabbing an iron bar, declaring that he was tired of always escaping. He stood his ground against the beast, but strangely, the creature ignored him. It turned around and walked away, leaving the boy confused but immensely relieved. He dropped his weapon, admitting the tension had nearly killed him. Park commented on the boy's incredible luck, but Hyuk argued that it was actually thanks to the hunter, as the monster had likely been too severely wounded to fight. Before he could finish his sentence, he noticed the man's body beginning to fade away. Unfazed by his own disappearance, the hunter simply reminded Hyuk to keep his promise about finding the family, warning that he would haunt him forever if he failed. Once the transfer process was complete, the system issued a critical warning. The host's body was insufficient to hold the power and required a complete reconstruction through awakening. It added a grim caveat that the procedure would be agonizing. Almost immediately, a sharp crack echoed from Hyuk's neck. Although he tried to maintain a tough facade, the sensation of his bones shattering and skin tearing was unbearable, eventually forcing him to scream in pain. By the following morning, the worst had passed. A man drove up to the location, whistling cheerfully, but stopped short when he noticed someone already there loading boxes onto a pickup truck. It was the protagonist. Surprised, the newcomer, Kai, asked what he was doing there. Hyuk deflected with a question of his own, reminding Kai that they had swapped shifts so he could have time off. He then fabricated a story, claiming a monster had trapped him there overnight. Visibly astonished, Kai asked if he had a death wish sleeping in such a dangerous zone, but Hyuk simply told him to drop the subject. Suspicious, Kai noted that it was strangely early for Hyuk to be there without the rest of the team. The colleague then offered a lie of his own, stating that he had simply started waking up earlier these days. Internally, Hyuk realized that the man was definitely hiding his true motives. The narrative reveals that in Hyuk's previous timeline, his downfall stemmed from a naive mistake. He had publicly registered his copy master ability, sparking jealousy that led to a brutal beating which left him for dead. He had also failed to secure the crystals from this specific event, returning too late to find them gone, a failure that became his greatest regret. Determined not to repeat history, he had planned to grab the items as early as possible this time. As he drove away, Hyuk glanced at the passenger seat where 3 Class B and 4 Class C crystals lay. Although he felt a pang of guilt taking the items from the hunter who had saved his life, he knew he needed them. However, he faced a dilemma regarding how to use them. He reasoned that while he might be able to sell monster cores discreetly, high-level crystals would trigger an official investigation by the government or the Hunter Association. Fearing he would be forced to sell them for peanuts to avoid scrutiny, he stared at his phone screen and concluded there was only one viable way out. Needing to fast-track his registration as an awakened, the protagonist made a phone call. When Shulmin answered, asking what he wanted, the boy smiled and offered to take him out for beers. He promised to cover the entire tab, provided Shulmin agreed to do him a favor in return. Later, inside a building within Seoul's safe zone, Hyuk attempted to sell his loot. The merchant offered 600 for the entire batch, but Hyuk pushed for a better price. Looking slightly embarrassed, the buyer explained that while those items used to go for 800, demand had crashed. As the man went on to complain about the shrinking population and rising inflation preventing people from spending, Hyuk stood there dissatisfied, contemplating his next move. Suddenly, 2 children appeared, crying. They rushed to hug Hyuk, confessing they were terrified he had abandoned them. Hyuk knelt to get on eye level with his younger sister, Choi Yoon-jung, and his little brother, Choi Yoon-chul. He pointed a finger at them, sternly asking why they were there instead of at school. The merchant interrupted, telling Hyuk not to scold them since they had only come out of genuine worry. He added that the boy needed to seriously consider what would happen to his siblings if he were to meet an untimely end. Hyuk told the children to dry their tears and come home so he could make lunch. The promise of grilled meat instantly brought smiles to their faces. However, Yoon-young passed on a message from the elderly woman who lived upstairs. She needed to see him immediately upon his return regarding the overdue rent. They all got into the car and drove back to the apartment. True to his word, Hyuk prepared a feast for his siblings, the landlady, and her grandson. When the old woman asked why he had prepared so much, the protagonist smiled and explained that he had visited the butcher specifically with her in mind. Concerned, she told him he should have saved the food for his little brother and sister. Instead of arguing, Hyuk simply handed her an envelope containing the rent money. Upon taking the envelope, the woman insisted on accepting only half the amount, acknowledging his difficult situation. Hyuk tried to refuse the discount out of surprise, but the woman's grandson, Chang-soo, chimed in. He told Hyuk to just take the offer, noting that people should help each other in hard times. The grandmother immediately whacked Chang-soo on the head with a spoon, reminding him that the apartment belonged to her, not him, so he should stay out of it. Rubbing his head, the grandson joked that the property would be his once she passed away. Threatening to hit him again, the old lady grumbled that Chang-soo was the reason for her constant stomach aches, complaining that he wasted his time wandering around doing nothing while pretending to study. Chang-soo argued that since the current era belonged to the awakened, traditional education like college was no longer necessary. He was preparing to learn directly from real hunters once he obtained his powers. Frustrated by this attitude, the elderly woman turned to Hyuk, urging him to talk some sense into her grandson since the boy usually respected his advice. The conversation was interrupted when Hyuk's phone rang. Stepping out onto the balcony, he took the call from Hyeol-min, who had news from his guild. The friend explained that his team leader had agreed to let Hyuk join them, but there was a catch. He would have to work for free. However, if he performed well during the mission, he might be offered a regular support role. Hyuk accepted the terms, prompting Hyeol-min to ask why he was suddenly interested in working as a porter. Unable to reveal his true motives, the boy lied, claiming that his current job had become too difficult and he needed to explore other options. Accepting the explanation, Hyeol-min instructed him to meet the team the following morning at 7:30 a.m. at the West Wall's Gate 7. Hanging up, the protagonist noted with satisfaction that everything was proceeding exactly as planned. He arrived at the gate the next day with a singular goal: to copy the tanker's skill and immediately head to the association to register. When Hyeol-min smiled and called out to him, noting that he had arrived early, Hyuk waved back, though his mind was entirely focused on his scheme. Hyeol-min introduced his team leader, a tanker, identifying him as the friend he had mentioned earlier. The leader introduced himself, noting that as the oldest member, he was open to answering any questions. He extended his hand, and the protagonist took it, saying he looked forward to working together. The leader reciprocated the sentiment, completely unaware that his abilities were being stolen at that very moment. A system notification appeared before Hyuk's eyes, allowing him to select 3 skills from the target. He wasted no time in choosing Iron Skin, Shield Attack, and Overload. Once the system confirmed the process was complete and the skills were stored in his menu, the boy marveled at how easy it had been. A simple handshake was all it took to acquire the powers of a tanker. However, his internal victory caused him to linger. The armored leader stared at him, confused by the lingering grin on the newcomer's face. Hyeol-min broke the silence, asking why he was smiling so creepily and refusing to let go of the leader's hand. Exploiting the awkward tension, Hyuk laughed and complimented the man's strong grip as an excuse. Embarrassed, he finally released the handshake and apologized, though the team leader dismissed it as no big deal. The leader then directed him toward a vehicle parked nearby. As they approached, Hyuk noticed the rest of the team. Two men were chatting, while a male and female pair seemed busy inspecting their bows. A driver was already waiting, and a young woman stood nearby, absorbed in her phone. Before they boarded, the armored man instructed Jun-hyuk to introduce himself to the rest of the squad. As the truck began its journey, the boy sat silently, dismissing the value of the team's skills. He reasoned that these abilities would eventually become useless once he copied powers from higher-level awakened individuals. However, he decided to copy them anyway, figuring he could simply delete them later if necessary. By that point, he had already acquired 13 skills, including 3 related to healing. Glancing at the girl who remained glued to her phone, he noted that he had also secured a mapping skill, 2 hunting abilities, and 7 negotiation techniques. The most exciting prospect for him was the potential to combine all these different powers. The team arrived at an area crowded with buildings, where lizard-like creatures with purple tongues and red eyes were prowling for prey. The team leader, Hyuk, immediately stepped in with his shield to block a monster, taunting it as he held his ground. From the sidelines, the protagonist watched and reflected on how powerful he could become by mixing skills from various roles. Following the leader's command, Lee Dong-yup joined the fight, swiftly landing 3 arrows into one of the beasts. Hyuk then ordered Yejin, who was positioned on a rooftop, to finish the job. She acknowledged the instruction and fired a high-speed arrow that struck the monster directly in the eye, taking it down. With the creature defeated, Hyuk praised the team's performance and informed them that only 2 enemies remained. Jun-hyuk briefly considered registering his powers right then for the thrill of it, but decided it was smarter to wait until the hunt was over to avoid complicating matters. Later that day, the team leader approached Jun-hyuk to compliment his endurance, impressed by how many monster byproducts he had carried. Just then, another porter walked by, complaining that he couldn't handle the weight anymore. Seizing the opportunity, Soo-min bragged that his friend had been famous in school for his fists. When the leader asked if this was before the catastrophe, Soo-min confirmed it, adding that the protagonist used to outperform trained athletes naturally. Jun-hyuk felt embarrassed as he listened to the conversation. When the leader asked if he had been a delinquent, Soo-min quickly defended him, explaining that he only fought people who deserved it and had actually dreamed of becoming a detective. The leader then handed Jun-hyuk an envelope with his payment. Although the boy tried to refuse, Hyuk insisted he take it, stating that the day would have gone differently without his help. He even asked if Jun-hyuk would consider continuing as a porter. Smiling, the boy promised to think about it as the man walked away, expecting to see him again soon. Afterwards, Soo-min invited him to a barbecue, but the protagonist declined, mentioning he had plans for the evening. Curious, his friend immediately asked if those plans involved a date. Later, at the Soul Awakened Association, Hyuk approached the counter exclusively reserved for tankers. The female employee on duty seemed flustered by what she had just heard and asked him to repeat himself. When Hyuk reiterated that he was there to register as an awakened, confirming he had gained his powers just that morning, the woman stared at him with a look of pure disbelief. Sensing her hesitation, the boy nervously asked if there was an issue with his request. The employee quickly reassured him, explaining that her reaction was simply because he was the first person to awaken as a tanker in months. She congratulated him on the achievement and asked for his ID to move the process forward. Hyuk handed over the document and was directed to a nearby bench to wait. As he sat down with nothing to do, a wave of melancholy washed over him. He recalled the moment he first opened his eyes after returning to the past. Initially convinced he was dreaming, his mind drifted to the tragedy of his previous life. While he was serving time in prison, his siblings had visited him only to die in a car accident shortly after. That loss had left him inconsolable and drove him to become a villain. However, seeing them alive in this new timeline had filled his heart with joy. Realizing this second chance was real, he made a silent vow to use all his strength to protect his loved ones. Hyuk decided to check his status by activating the system interface. He noted that his resistance ranged between 6,000 and 15,000, while his strength fell between 2,000 and 5,000. Impressive stats for a first awakening. However, he was puzzled by a notification stating that core generation was in progress. Unsure of what that meant, he decided to wait for the process to conclude. His thoughts were interrupted when someone called his name. Turning around, he saw the female employee standing next to a smiling man in a lab coat. She returned his ID, informing him that his identity verification was complete and that he should follow the doctor for his evaluation. The man introduced himself as Lim Ji-hoon and extended his hand. Hyuk reciprocated the greeting, saying it was a pleasure to meet him. During the handshake, Hyuk secretly attempted to copy the doctor's ability, only to discover that the man was not an awakened. This surprised him, as he had assumed everyone working for the association possessed powers. Afterward, Dr. Lim explained that the examination consisted of 3 stages, starting with a machine analysis of his strength and resistance. Inside the testing room, Hyuk lay down while various wires were attached to his body. The doctor advised him to relax, warning that the measurement would take about 10 minutes to complete. Regarding the second phase of the exam, the doctor explained that it required demonstrating a unique skill, specifically the shield attack. Moments later, the protagonist stood ready with his weapon, facing a practice dummy while Jihoon and another observer watched from behind a glass pane. Jihoon announced that they were measuring aggression rates and instructed the boy to strike the target wherever he pleased. Without hesitation, Hyuk smashed the shield directly into the dummy's head, a move that left the medical staff completely stunned. However, the process hit a snag before the third stage could begin. Handing Hyuk a cup of hot coffee, the doctor explained that due to issues selecting evaluators, the final part of the test would be postponed for 2 days. Taking the drink, Hyuk asked if he had passed the day's assessments. Jihoon confirmed that everything was in order and directed him to the reception desk to collect his basic gear. Internally, the boy barely suppressed his excitement at finally receiving the association's standard equipment. The mood shifted as Jihoon expressed his anxiety over the dwindling number of tankers and healers. As the protagonist sipped his coffee, the doctor lamented that most people forced into awakening preferred safer roles like negotiators or support staff. Furthermore, awakening stones for the combat classes were becoming incredibly rare. Listening silently, Hyuk reflected on the fact that possessing a stone didn't guarantee awakening, and remembered how his past criminal record had previously barred him from registering. Realizing he was rambling, the doctor apologized, admitting he was just enthusiastic to see a tanker after such a long time. Hyuk stood up and assured him it was no trouble at all. To wrap things up, Jihoon instructed him to return at a specific time for the final test, noting that the details would arrive via text message the following day. They exchanged a handshake, with Hyuk expressing his eagerness to work together. By the time he stepped outside carrying his suitcase, the sky was darkening as evening set in. Walking down the street, he decided to make a phone call. Shulman answered, asking what was going on, to which the boy replied that it was nothing serious. He just wanted to share the news that he had awakened as a tanker earlier that day. The friend on the other end was in shock, asking if he was actually serious. Gazing into a building window, the protagonist insisted he wouldn't joke about such a matter. He then stepped into what appeared to be a shop, confident he was at the right location. Finally accepting the truth, Shulman burst into laughter, amazed that his friend had become a tanker so suddenly, considering they had been together just a few hours prior. Getting no response, the friend on the line asked if Hyuk was still there. The protagonist, however, was momentarily distracted by an expensive model of a mantis front leg, priced at an eye-watering $3 million. Remembering the call, he blamed the silence on a bad connection, before shifting the topic to his recent visit to the association. He explained that since only the final stage of his testing remained, he wanted to join another hunt to observe. When his friend questioned the necessity of this, Hyuk lied, claiming he had been too busy carrying equipment last time to properly watch the team's tactics. While waiting for an answer, he spotted something that improved his mood instantly. His friend promised to check with the team leader and get back to him. Ending the call, Hyuk grabbed a bracelet from the shelf and told the shopkeeper he wanted to buy it along with an Exeter solution. He recognized the artifact immediately. In his previous life, Jaden Russell, the notorious third-ranked villain, had used it. Hyuk recalled a time before his regression, when he was ranked 8th, where he shared drinks with Jaden. During that meeting, the villain had explained exactly how to acquire that specific bracelet and the essential potions. The shopkeeper stared at him coldly, saying nothing. Hyuk stood in silence as well, mentally calculating the 30% efficiency boost the item would grant to all his abilities. Finally breaking the tension, he asked why the man was looking at him that way. Apologizing for the intrusion, the seller asked if he had registered as an awakened earlier that day. When Hyuk confirmed, the man suddenly raised his fist as if to strike him. Hyuk braced himself, but the man stopped his hand inches from Hyuk's face, smiling and declaring that he knew he was right. The clerk revealed that he was also an awakened, possessing the ability of teleportation. Relieved that he wasn't about to be punched, the protagonist realized the gesture was a friendly fist bump. As he extended his hand to reciprocate, he decided he would copy that teleportation skill as well. Just then, another man appeared and introduced himself as Juan Mansu, a user of spatial manipulation. Hyuk greeted him politely, though internally, he marked this as yet another ability he wanted to steal. The first clerk admitted he had overheard the earlier phone call and asked if Hyuk was really a tanker. The second man added that such a class was practically nobility among the awakened. Surprised to find two awakened individuals working in retail, Hyuk asked if this was just a side job. The men shook their heads, explaining that it was their primary employment. The long-haired clerk clarified that the market was flooded with people holding support abilities, making it incredibly difficult for them to find work in the field. The shop owner explained that to make a living, he had opened a store specializing in antiques and supplies for the awakened. He handed over the Exeter solution Huck had requested, noting that the total for both items came to 300,000 karmo. A satisfied smile crossed Huck's face as he realized he finally had all the necessary components: the bracelet, the solution, the high-ranking crystals waiting at home, and the strawberry juice that would bind them all together. Back at his apartment, Huck examined the bracelet, which was now emitting a purple glow, and knew he had succeeded. As he slid the accessory onto his arm, he identified it as Twilight. A system notification immediately appeared, announcing that the 38th of the 101 artifacts created by the original Master System had been activated. The message further clarified that since the user belonged to the original system, the Twilight bracelet was now fully unlocked and registered as a combined artifact. Although the reference to the 101 artifacts puzzled him, his thoughts were interrupted by the sudden ringing of his phone, which gave him a start. It was Chillman, calling to report that he had spoken to the team leader. However, the leader remained skeptical, refusing to believe Huck was a tanker without seeing proof. Huck laughed, admitting he thought he had been rejected, but his friend told him to relax. Just then, the spatial manipulation skill Huck had copied triggered unexpectedly, opening a portal. Startled, he began reaching through the rift, while Chillman reminded him not to be late. Huck grabbed his suitcase and promised to be there on time before hanging up. The next morning, the team gathered at Gate 7 as planned. They were stunned when Huck shouted a greeting, arriving fully clad in association gear and carrying a shield. Chillman stared at the outfit in disbelief, prompting Huck to confirm that he had indeed become a tanker. His friend asked how such a transformation was possible in just one day. Embarrassed, the protagonist lied, claiming the awakening had occurred on his way home. The team leader remarked that it was truly impressive, especially considering how much natural awakening rates had dropped. Huck agreed and mentioned that he would take his final ability test the following day, asking if the leader could offer any guidance. The man replied that while he wasn't sure how much he could teach, he could offer advice as a veteran. Gripping his shield, he asked if the young man understood why he carried it. He explained that it wasn't simply because he had awakened as a tanker, but because he had made a choice. He warned that when fighting monsters, physical exhaustion is inevitable, so Huck needed to remember that the shield was there for when his body eventually tired. The leader emphasized that determination, rather than stats or skills, was the true key to recovery. Following this advice, the group moved toward the center of the battlefield, where they spotted a sleeping creature that looked like a cross between a bear and an armadillo. Staying hidden, Hyun asked Hunim if he had identified the target. The young man confirmed it was a true Decker. Ready to proceed, Hyun ordered Jang Daijin to verify the location, and the scout immediately began mapping the area. The leader then briefed the team, explaining that although true Deckers had slow movements and low attack power, they possessed high defense stats comparable to an E-rank monster. This information made the group nervous. Keelman questioned if they were strong enough, while another member complained of exhaustion before the fight had even started. A third young man admitted he was terrified the beast might charge at him. Trying to boost morale, the leader reminded them that the prey was slow and insisted that they were one of the best veteran teams around. Hearing this, a long-haired woman joked that, as the healer, she was in for an easy day. Meanwhile, Hyun confirmed with Jakil that all traps were set. He then readied his shield, ordering Keelman and Dongyup to follow him, while instructing Haesu and Hyuk to hold their positions. The protagonist acknowledged the command, but as he watched part of the team move out, he felt uneasy. He knew from the past that this specific group had been wiped out, and he was sure a different monster was responsible. He reasoned that if they were only facing a Drumeki, the team should have survived, which meant he needed to uncover the true cause of their deaths. Scanning the area, he concluded that something definitely felt wrong. Back on the front line, the tanker leader checked if Yejin was ready. Upon her confirmation, he ordered her to open fire. Her arrow struck the monster's shell directly, and she immediately signaled that she was moving to the next planned position. The sleeping beast stood up, furious. Shouting, the leader told everyone to prepare for combat, and his partners quickly acknowledged the order. Rearing up on its hind legs, the creature prepared to attack with full force. Sticking to the strategy, the archer landed 3 precise shots, causing the bear-armadillo hybrid to roar in pain. Seeing that the attacks were effective, the leader praised the archer, but instructed him to keep his distance. However, ignoring the strategy, the young man announced he was going to charge in, leaving the leader worried as the situation began to drift off course. Facing the monster head-on, the young archer announced that he was tired of hesitant attacks. He wanted to kill the beast quickly so he could go home. He fired directly into the True-Decker's armpit, but instead of taking it down, the shot only enraged the creature further. The leader shouted for him to stop being foolish and follow orders, but the boy arrogantly mocked the beast, claiming it was too slow to touch him. He spoke too soon. An instant later, the monster's fist sent him flying hard against a wall. Seeing his friend in danger, Chilman yelled in frustration and jumped into the battle. He drove his sword down, aiming for a critical hit, but the blade merely sparked against the monster's shell without penetrating. Horrified, he screamed that the armor was too hard, as his weapon hadn't even left a scratch. Ignoring the swordsman, the creature turned its focus back to the stunned boy on the ground. Just as the beast prepared a lethal blow with its claws, Kyung stepped in, using his shield to deliver a powerful bash that saved the team member. The heavy blow seemed to knock the monster out, but it recovered and stood up almost instantly. The leader immediately ordered Chilman to engage in melee combat, while directing Yi-jae and Dong-yuk to provide ranged support. Activating a special skill, Kyung released blue waves of energy and declared he would finish the fight in aggressor mode. The monster punched the shield futilely. A distraction arrow flew past, signaling Yi-jin to unleash a barrage from above, successfully hitting the creature's face. Irritated by the damage, the beast curled up into its defensive armadillo mode. Seizing the opportunity, Kyung ordered a coordinated strike. Chilman obeyed immediately, charging from behind while the leader hammered the front. As they struck the creature, the tanker instructed the team to maintain basic attacks until he gave the next command. Chilman, already feeling the strain, complained that the mere sight of the monster's back was exhausting him. Watching from a safe distance, the protagonist listened as the nearby healer commented that the hunt might end soon. She expressed a desire to join the fight, noting that these rare monsters usually appeared only once or twice a year. When the boy asked about their frequency, she replied that the team had encountered 3 in the last 5 months. Noticing his eagerness to learn, she smiled and handed him a Jeremy M7 measuring device from Jeremy Corp to help him prepare for his upcoming test. Looking through the lens, the boy was fascinated by the real-time data. The healer explained that the True-Decker possessed 30,000 health and a massive 150,000 shield points. Seeing these numbers, the protagonist realized that breaking through such defenses would take an eternity. Suddenly, the atmosphere shifted as Kyung shouted a frantic warning. The life signals of the 4 team members on the far side of the map had completely disappeared. Kyung questioned whether the report meant their teammates had actually been eliminated. Visibly nervous, the protagonist asked for confirmation that the data was accurate. Suddenly, a nearby structure began to shake violently, causing deep cracks to spread across the walls. A massive hole burst open with a deafening crash, revealing a giant praying mantis with claws stained with blood. Realizing the severity of the situation as the beast approached, the boy noted that things looked grim. Amidst the chaos, the leader frantically asked how much time they had before the monster reached them. Breaking into a cold sweat, the blonde scout estimated they had 2 minutes at most. The leader immediately shouted for Hyuk and Hyeso to evacuate and find cover. The protagonist finally understood why he had felt so uneasy earlier. Acting quickly, he grabbed the healer's hand and urged her to move fast. However, she panicked when she realized he was leading her toward Kyung instead of away from the danger. Hyuk explained that the distance was too short to escape safely. Seeing them advance, the leader demanded to know why the boy was disobeying the retreat order. Shield raised, Hyuk argued that running was not an option because the monster was simply too fast. He pointed out that if the Mantis combined forces with the True-Decker, the entire team would be wiped out. As if to emphasize the danger, the bloodthirsty Mantis prepared to launch a full-scale attack. Facing the creature, the boy insisted that their only choice was to hold the line as long as possible. Desperate, Kyung called the young man crazy, scolding him for acting like an experienced tanker when he was just a rookie. Their argument was cut short when the Mantis, tired of waiting, attacked. Hyuk managed to block the strikes with his shield, retorting that he would soon be in live combat anyway, so he had to succeed regardless of his experience level. While the monster hammered against his defense, the boy suddenly went on the offensive. He jumped and struck the creature's head, shocking the others with his determination. Kyung-min yelled that he was an idiot, reminding him that this was a real battle where he could die, not a test. Unfazed, the protagonist replied that they needed to worry about the true-decker behind them instead. He warned that if the second monster wasn't stopped, they were all doomed. Right on cue, the bear-armadillo hybrid launched a merciless attack on the two young men. Kyung raised his shield to block a direct impact and instructed Young-huk to join the protagonist in an effort to buy time. The young man obeyed immediately, rushing to support our boy. Straining to hold his ground, the leader then ordered Kyung-min to remain there and assist him in handling the monster. However, the creature executed a sudden, unpredictable move that sent the leader flying. From the ground, he urgently commanded Ji-chil to deploy a binding trap on the true-decker. The boy complied without hesitation. The trap spun rapidly toward the beast, releasing chains that wrapped tightly around its legs upon contact. He shouted that the restraints would hold for 5 minutes. As the leader scrambled to his feet, he realized the desperation of their position. With the true-decker in front and the mantis behind, their escape route was completely cut off. Meanwhile, Huk fought with everything he had, using his shield for both offense and defense. He was supported by the other boy, who fired arrows every 5 seconds, but their attacks seemed useless against the giant insect. Refusing to surrender, the protagonist struck the creature again, finally drawing the gaze of its glowing red eyes. To his surprise, a projectile suddenly slammed directly into the monster's head. From a nearby rooftop, the archer praised Seo Ye-jin for the shot, but she quickly retorted that it wasn't the time for compliments. Having pinpointed the source of the attack, the mantis turned and charged toward the girl. Huk screamed for her to evacuate immediately, but she realized it was too late. The monster's legs were already crashing through her window. The direct strike left her with multiple injuries. On the ground, the archer screamed her name in panic, firing arrows continuously in a desperate bid to distract the beast. When his efforts failed, he began to fear the worst. Beside the protagonist, the worried healer asked what she should do. Huk looked down at his bracelet, realizing he had been too careless. He had foolishly assumed he could get stronger overnight, and that using his shield attack twice would be enough to keep the artifact active. He hurriedly scanned his system options to find a way to save Ye-jin. Reviewing the data, he considered boosting the bracelet's effectiveness by 50%. Although he knew it was a high-risk move that might come at a great cost, he decided there was no other choice. Pulses of blue light erupted from his body, extending toward the broken window where the mantis was poised to kill the injured, trapped girl. As Huk prayed that the energy would pull the monster back, the young healer beside him realized she couldn't just watch her friend die. She ran off to help, leaving the protagonist alone. With nothing left to do but wait, he looked ahead and saw that his strategy had succeeded. Although the team leader urged Ye-jin to evacuate, Huk insisted she would be safe, claiming he had successfully diverted the monster's attention. Hyun demanded to know how he could be so sure, but the boy didn't waste time explaining. He was already charging straight at the mantis. As he struck with his shield, he realized that relying solely on basic attacks was too risky to keep his ability active. With no other choice, he decided to utilize his copied powers, activating both the destructive body and negotiator skills. The giant insect nearly landed a blow, but Huk managed to dodge it with a well-timed jump. He noted that with these skills active, even his basic attacks now dealt damage comparable to a primary damage dealer. Suddenly, a familiar sensation washed over him. Hyper-perception. A smile crossed his face as he recognized the feeling from his life before the regression. It felt as though every cell in his body had awakened, mirroring the state that had once allowed him to reach the 8th rank among villains. Empowered by this heightened sense and renewed strength, he resumed his assault, hitting the mantis hard enough to crack its legs. Meanwhile, inside the building, Ye-jin managed to struggle to her feet. However, a severe arm wound caused her to lose a significant amount of blood, draining her strength and causing her to drop her arrow when she tried to aim. She was startled when Hai-su suddenly appeared and began healing her, instructing her to keep quiet to avoid breaking her concentration. The archer argued that Hai-su should be helping Huk instead, but the healer dismissed the concern. She pointed out that she couldn't do anything for the boy since his health was still full. Glancing out the window, Hai-su remarked that Huk was fighting like a madman, much like their team leader, and hadn't taken a single hit so far. While Huk demonstrated his strength, Chil-min and Hyun remained locked in combat with the true-decker. Despite the creature's furious roars, the leader observed that its shield was on the verge of failing. He ordered Chil-min to stop wasting time with basic hits and to unleash his amplified skills before the trap expired, urging him to attack without worrying about his safety. As the monster broke free and prepared to strike, Hyun raised his shield, declaring that he had been waiting for this exact opening. He charged forward to intercept the blow, just as a warning came that the trap had only 10 seconds left. Hyun shouted the signal, and Chil-min immediately understood. Drawing his weapon, the young man activated a critical attack. A jagged beam of blue light erupted from the monster's body as Chil-min prayed for it to explode. His attack succeeded, and the Truedecker crumbled into dust. Standing before the remains of the beast, Hyun shouted to the rest of the squad that their sector was finally clear. The protagonist's friend spotted a red crystal and excitedly announced that he had found both the item and a skill card. However, the team leader quickly cut the celebration short, stating that this wasn't the moment to rejoice and ordering him to immediately go assist Hyuk. Meanwhile, Hyuk continued his relentless assault, drawing green slime from the mantis with every strike. Watching the scene unfold, the leader, who was a tanker himself, struggled to understand how such a feat was possible. Even while fighting solo, the boy glanced back and told Chil-min to retreat if he had already finished his task. Chil-min paused, remarking that his friend was truly crazy. Not only was he fighting without backup, but he was also issuing orders. Agreeing with this assessment, Hyun suggested they treat this as practical experience, noting that the rookie seemed to have the situation well in hand. When Hyuk questioned the decision, the leader confirmed it and asked the rest of the squad if they had any objections. Although everyone else agreed, Yijin refused to stand down, declaring that she wasn't the type to leave a debt unpaid. She fired an arrow from the rooftop, but the shot missed the mark. Taking matters into his own hands, the protagonist leaped into the air to deliver the finishing blow. He drove his shield directly into the monster's skull, instantly crushing its resistance as it collapsed to the ground. Jaw dropping in disbelief, Hyun turned to Chil-min and demanded to know if he was absolutely certain that his friend had really awakened as a tanker. As night fell over the battlefield, the leader urged the exhausted team to move fast, warning that lingering could attract new monsters. Hyuk listened silently as he wiped the green gore from his shield. His friend approached, asking if he had used that technique again. When the boy looked confused, the friend clarified that he was referring to hyperperception, recognizing the signs from the tough fights Hyuk had been involved in back at school. The protagonist remained silent, prompting his friend to insist that he must have used it given his performance. He then asked if the boy was feeling all right, recalling that the skill used to cause him severe headaches. As he stowed his shield, Hyuk reassured him that he was fine, speculating that the awakening had likely fixed the side effect. Calling him incredibly lucky, the friend insisted that Hyuk owed him a beer that very night and would accept no excuses. However, upon seeing his phone ring, Hyuk declined, explaining that it would have to wait for another day because he needed to spend time with his siblings. Hyun caught the boy off guard, demanding to know who he really was. He questioned how a supposed rookie could possibly fight with such skill only a day after awakening. When the protagonist gave a vague answer, Chil-min tried to intervene to stop his friend from saying something foolish. However, the boy simply claimed that the desperate situation might have triggered an adrenaline rush, giving him superhuman strength. The leader clearly didn't buy the story, asking if the boy really expected him to be that gullible, to which the protagonist responded with silence. Turning to the rest of the squad, the leader made a serious announcement. He explained that although the newcomer had single-handedly defeated the mantis, he wasn't officially registered yet. Consequently, if word got out about this unauthorized combat, the entire team could face severe penalties. He ordered everyone to keep their mouths shut about the day's events. The archer smiled with relief, while the other two men laughed, assuring Hyun that they weren't stupid enough to take that risk. To the protagonist's confusion, Hyun thanked him rather than scolding him further. The leader clarified that without the boy's help, they would all be dead, so he intended to include him in the profit split as a full tanker. When the boy expressed concern that this would reduce everyone else's share, Haisu stepped in. She agreed that the payout would be smaller but insisted no one would mind. With a smile, she added that if anyone did complain, she would simply stop healing them. The conversation was interrupted by the boy's phone. Curious, the healer teased him, asking if it was a girlfriend. He smiled and denied it, claiming it was just his siblings calling. However, he was lying. The call was actually from the association, leaving him puzzled as to why they were contacting him so urgently. Later, at the association building, the protagonist asked why his evaluation had been rescheduled so suddenly. Jae-hoon explained that the hunters sent to Thailand were returning that night. A C-rank monster had emerged in Bangkok a week prior, drawing international support, and the Korean team had outperformed the Japanese squad. As a result, the association's focus was entirely on that event. Hyuk realized that the administration just wanted to rush through his process to get him out of the way. He announced he was ready to start, prompting the official to apologize for the abrupt change. Jae-hoon explained that the exam would take place in a virtual combat room, As a digital monster materialized in front of him, the boy noted that the setup looked exactly like the simulation rooms he remembered from before his regression. The doctor interrupted the boy's train of thought to issue a warning. The opponent was an F-rank Xerus, and the evaluation would run for a full hour. He added that the longer the candidate survived, the higher his score would be. Glancing over his shoulder, the doctor checked if the panel of judges, consisting of Hyung, a man with glasses, and a long-haired woman, were prepared. The tanker nodded, confirming they were set. With the signal given, Jae-hoon announced the start of the simulation. As the digital monster charged, the protagonist's mind drifted to the news about high-ranking hunters visiting the association later that day. He raised his shield to block the creature's initial assault, forcing it to retreat. A plan formed in his mind. He needed to stall and use this opportunity to copy the skills of those elite hunters when they arrived. When the monster grinned at him, the boy smiled back, confident that if he played his cards right, success was guaranteed. However, he needed to be careful. He realized that relying on his hyperperception would make the test too easy. Since the average hunting time for such a monster was around 4 hours, finishing too quickly or showing stats vastly superior to his Stage 2 results would look suspicious. He decided that the best strategy was to execute standard textbook maneuvers, filling the time efficiently without standing out too much. 3 hours into the session, Jae-hoon began to worry because the boy was repeating the same basic movements, which contradicted the confidence he had shown earlier. The judges, however, saw things differently. Hyung, visibly impressed, remarked that they were witnessing the birth of a super rookie after a long drought. The woman noted that his aggression levels remained incredibly stable, while the man with glasses pointed out the most impressive detail. The young man was dodging attacks with barely any movement at all. Suddenly, the judges began making excuses to leave the room. The woman apologized, saying she needed to use the restroom, and slipped out. Hyung followed suit, claiming he had eaten too much for breakfast and needed a moment. Left alone with the doctor, the man in the suit removed his glasses and muttered that there was no point in continuing the observation. Seeing Jae-hoon break into a cold sweat at the comment, the judge simply grabbed his phone and walked out. In the hallway, it became clear that their departures were not coincidental. The woman was already on a call, eagerly reporting on the candidate. Hyung was doing the same, explaining to someone on the line that maintaining perfect textbook form for so long was actually the hardest skill to master. The man with glasses was also busy on his phone, confirming that the protagonist was an exceptional find. Meanwhile, inside the simulation, the boy continued his steady battle, unaware of the chaos he had caused outside. The man insisted that with 2 other guilds already involved, they needed to act immediately to ensure no one else could make a move on the recruit. Meanwhile, the test concluded, and the receptionist handed the boy his new registration certificate with a warm smile, praising his performance. After checking the details on the document, the boy listened as the woman remarked on how incredible it was to achieve a C rank upon a first awakening. When he asked why that was significant, she explained that it was a rare occurrence, as the vast majority of people started between ranks F and E. As he walked out of the building, the protagonist felt puzzled. He hadn't done anything special during the test, yet he had still received a C rank. However, he decided to focus on the positive side. Now that he was officially registered, he could finally build a happy, legal life for himself and his younger siblings. His thoughts were interrupted by the roar of a crowd nearby. Turning toward the noise, he saw fans screaming the names of their idols as a famous trio approached. He recognized them immediately: Jae-hyun, a second-class sorceress and negotiator; Kim Yoon-ho, the nation's top-ranked hunter; and Lee Desau, the #1 tanker. Noticing that Desau looked particularly grumpy, the boy hesitated, wondering if he should risk approaching him. Eventually, he smiled and decided to take the chance, stepping directly into their path. The sudden move surprised the group. Feeling slightly awkward, the boy announced that he was a fan and honored to meet them. Jae-hyun kindly asked if he wanted an autograph, but the interaction became clumsy when the boy declined, leaving her embarrassed. He clarified that he was actually there because he was a fan of Lee Desau. Visibly irritated, the tanker demanded to know what he was talking about. Terrified that he was in trouble, the boy broke into a cold sweat as Desau leaned in and ordered him to repeat himself with a gaze that looked like it belonged to a villain. As the large man stepped closer, the protagonist braced himself, fearing he was about to be beaten up. When the angry hunter asked again, the boy had no choice but to reiterate that he was simply a fan. Unexpectedly, Desau turned to his companions and asked if they had heard that. Kim Yoon-ho burst into laughter, while Jae-hyun complained that they had been so close to winning, leaving the protagonist confused by the sudden shift in mood. The woman grumbled that the idiot had ruined it, but the tanker simply noted with satisfaction that at least they now knew he actually had fans. The story then shifts back 30 minutes in time, revealing the trio having a conversation in a limousine on their way to the association. The negotiator sat recalling a past incident where Desau had scared off a supposed admirer. Since that day, she hadn't witnessed anyone claiming to be his fan. Crossing her arms, she accused him of fabricating his popularity, reminding him of her distaste for liars. When Desau insisted that a man of his stature naturally had a following, she proposed a wager. If a genuine fan approached him upon their arrival at the association, she would grant a request. However, if no one appeared, he would have to pay a steep price. Desau asked for the terms, and she explained that their guild was short on tankers for the upcoming C-rank monster hunt. Losing the bet meant he would have to fill that role as the main tanker entirely for free. Back in the present, the dynamic had shifted. The tanker was grinning over his victory, while the woman scowled at her loss. Desau double-checked if Huck was truly a fan, causing the boy to briefly consider fleeing. To the boy's surprise, the large man lamented that he didn't have a pen for an autograph and offered a handshake instead. Although frozen in confusion, Huck seized the opportunity to copy the man's ability and grasped his hand. After the exchange, Desau asked for his name, and upon hearing it, handed over a business card, telling Huck to reach out if he ever needed assistance. Kim Yunho then stepped in, verifying if the boy's name was indeed Huck. When the confused protagonist confirmed it, the top-ranked hunter smiled, introduced himself, and offered his hand as well. This second handshake allowed the boy to steal another ability. Kim remarked that it was amazing to stumble upon a national treasure in such a place. When the puzzled tanker asked what he meant, Kim hugged him and joked that anyone who was actually a fan of Desau was rare enough to be a national treasure. With that, the two men hurried off to their meeting with the association president. Lingering behind, the woman muttered about how annoying the situation was. Seeing a chance to acquire one last skill, Huck approached her, claiming to be her fan as well and asking for a handshake, declaring it would be a lifelong honor. However, Jaehyun simply turned her back and walked away, completely ignoring him. The boy found her behavior odd, especially since she had offered him an autograph just moments earlier. Unable to copy her power, he decided to leave, reasoning that he had already secured more than enough for one day. Meanwhile, at the American Awakened Association in New York, two men were huddled around a computer screen. They were analyzing the data from Huck's recent test, stunned to see that after 3 hours of combat, the candidate had depleted a mere 3% of his life force. The bald man asked about the boy's nationality, to which the blonde man replied that he was from Korea. Skeptical, his partner wondered if the footage might be a fake, but the blonde man dismissed the idea, pointing out that the subjects were completely unaware they were being monitored. When the blonde man reached for the phone to report their findings, his friend stopped him, insisting it was too early to involve the higher-ups. Paolo then quizzed Kevin on the current number of S-rank awakened individuals. He answered his own question, explaining that since there were only 5 who had started as rank C, nations everywhere were keeping a close watch on such cases. As Kevin remained silent, Paolo warned that overlooking this boy could mean missing out on a future S-rank talent. He urged his partner to look closely at the screen, which displayed results that demanded further investigation. The footage showed a building under a clear, sunny sky in a quiet neighborhood. A man calmly exited a portal on the rooftop and opened the door to the stairwell. As he descended, he reviewed the progress of his defense and resistance stats, noting that the system indicated a significant reduction in damage taken thanks to his universal skills. His mind drifted to a battle scene set among ancient ruins. Facing a terrifying monster, the fighter had prepared his shield, using a stun skill to interrupt the creature's assault. The blow had visibly weakened the enemy. Realizing the opponent was damaged, he had utilized abilities copied from Kim Yu-ho. The system highlighted that while these unique skills didn't boost raw attack power, they drastically improved speed and evasion. He recalled landing a lightning-fast aerial strike, teleporting into the fray to deliver a guaranteed critical hit to the monster's throat with movement faster than light. A satisfied smile spread across the protagonist's face as he continued down the stairs. He reflected on how the abilities he had copied from Lee Desau and Kim Yu-ho were far superior to his original ones. He realized that by combining these new powers, he could easily handle monsters in the beginner zones. Upon entering his apartment, the silence struck him as odd. Suspecting something was wrong, he walked over to the kitchen counter and touched a hamburger, finding it stone cold. Just as he began to worry, a bedroom door opened and a girl emerged, looking as though she had just woken up. She asked why he was home so late. Confused, the protagonist asked Yoon-jung if they hadn't eaten dinner yet. Still groggy, she explained that they had thought it would be better to wait for him so they could all eat together. Upon realizing why they had waited, he insisted that she should have gone ahead and eaten without him. The girl, however, claimed she hadn't been hungry. When he pressed her for a reason, tears welled up in her eyes as she explained that she had suffered a nightmare about him dying. To make matters worse, she had panicked when he didn't answer his phone. He hugged Yoon-jung to comfort her, assuring her that he was safe, even though she was clearly shaken by the experience. Just then, another child walked into the room wearing blue pajamas. His younger brother looked equally terrified by the long delay. Despite the emotional reunion, the mood quickly lifted, and they finally sat down to eat the chicken together. Although the protagonist felt guilty that work had caused him to break his promise of spending more time with them, the three of them happily devoured the meal like a proper family. Later, as the night deepened and silence fell over the house, the children fell into a deep sleep. Meanwhile, the protagonist was busy on his phone. He took photographs of his items, preparing to list them for a potential buyer. However, he hesitated, feeling that simply selling Karen's Blessing and Mountain Splitter was a waste. He attempted to interact with the card to gain a new ability, but the system rejected the attempt due to user incompatibility. He even tried to copy the ability, but that failed as well. Defeated, he realized he had no choice but to sell them. Suddenly, a notification popped up, catching him off guard. Core Generation. A sharp pain instantly shot through his head as the new function initiated. The system announced that he had gained additional points and abilities, but he couldn't make sense of it as a roaring noise grew louder in his mind. He watched in confusion as a loading bar appeared, sitting at just 1%. He had no idea what this meant, as Kixil Yunam had never mentioned anything like it. Despite the pain and confusion, he was anxious to see what would happen once the process completed. Energy began to surge through his entire body, triggering a sensation that reminded him of his initial awakening. As his eyes shifted to a glowing bright blue, he decided the best course of action was to check his status immediately. The scene shifts to a landscape of abandoned, ruined buildings. A vehicle navigated through the city's debris, and inside, the hero used the system to input a search term. The original system is split into two distinct components, the master system and the copy system. The master system functions as the central hub, managing derivative systems across dimensions as an independent entity rather than an awakened one. In contrast, the copy system is an awakened mechanic tied to a single user. It possesses the unique ability to copy, recommend, and even create new skills, applying these effects to any life form possessing a derivative system. However, the protagonist still seemed to struggle to fully grasp these concepts. As he climbed a few more floors, he chewed on this information, wondering if it meant he could copy abilities directly from monsters. After a long trek, he finally arrived at his destination and paused to drink some water and recover his energy. Reflecting on everything he had learned, he concluded that the data was indeed incredibly useful. Moments later, he pulled up his status window. The profile identified him as Choi Jun-hyuk, a 25-year-old copy master with a level 1 core and several power boosts. He immediately noticed updates on the screen, which listed his attributes, additional points, and abilities, along with the formation of a completely new status category. A smile crossed his face as he watched the Twilight Bracelet activate its All-Stars plus 100 option, significantly boosting his stats. Pleased with the upgrade, he turned his attention to the core. He surmised that the recharge point likely indicated his maximum capacity, calculating that his power consumption could potentially exceed 20,000. With the bracelet's efficiency bonuses, he felt capable of impressive output. However, he found it odd that his stats were still at level 1, though he remained hopeful that they would grow as his level increased. His thoughts were interrupted by a strange noise rising from the bottom of the building. Rushing to the edge, he peered down and spotted a powerful monster wandering through the ruined city streets. He immediately checked the map to scan the area. As expected, the neighborhood was completely uninhabited, making it the perfect testing ground. Down below, the creature looked visibly agitated. Choi Jun-hyuk hurried to the parking lot to get a better vantage point. Closer inspection revealed that the enemy was eyeless, but appeared extremely dangerous. Standing motionless, the boy waited for the perfect opening to initiate combat. His eyes shifted color as he activated his power weapon skill. The system indicated that he could shape the energy into various forms, such as a spear, sword, or dagger. Losing its patience, the monster let out a scream and began advancing toward him. Deciding that a ranged attack was the best strategy against such a powerful foe, he chose to summon a longbow, and the weapon immediately began to materialize in his hands. It finally dawned on the protagonist why Park Gang-ho possessed such immense strength, but with an opponent charging at full speed, there was no time to dwell on the thought. Choi Jun-hyuk immediately readied his bow, shifting into an attack stance. He released an arrow that struck the monster's face with surgical precision, following it up with a barrage of rapid, critical shots. With determination burning in his eyes, he realized that he had successfully maximized not just his core, but his entire range of capabilities. Under this relentless assault, the creature screamed in desperation as it began to stumble, losing what little balance it had left. Eager to press the advantage, Jun-hyuk sprinted toward the beast, rather than letting up. Mid-jump, he mentally commanded the system to switch his weapon to a longsword. A confident smile spread across his face as he felt the full weight of Park Gang-ho's inherited skills coursing through him. Gripping the hilt tightly as he closed the distance, he focused on his ultimate goal, to become as strong as his hero. He delivered a devastating slash to the horrendous creature's body, and as the monster collapsed, shards were visible scattered across the dark night. The victory left the protagonist feeling deeply satisfied. Checking his phone, he noted that an hour and 20 minutes had already flown by. He estimated that clearing out the remaining demons in the vicinity would take another half hour, which felt like a lot given the time. Just then, the phone rang, displaying the association's number on the screen. Although confused by a call at such an odd hour, his curiosity won out, and he decided to answer. On the other end, a woman introduced herself as Kim Joo-hee from the reception team, and without immediately stating her business, tentatively asked if he was awake. She went on to explain that she had received an urgent directive from the secretary's office. The association president requested a private meeting with him. As he listened to the details, Jun-hyuk noticed another monster emerging nearby. Keeping his focus on the call despite the looming threat, he tried to gather the necessary logistics. He asked when the president usually arrived, and the receptionist confirmed his schedule was fixed at 7 a.m. daily. Glancing at the clock, which read 6:20 a.m., Jun-hyuk calculated that he could make it to the designated location by 7. With the creature closing in fast, he didn't prolong the conversation. He simply assured her he would arrive in 30 minutes, hung up the phone, and turned his full attention to the new challenge. As the creature charged with heavy, thundering footsteps, the protagonist reacted instantly. He raised his shield and triggered a stun charge, halting the aberration's assault in its tracks. His eyes began to glow as he followed up with a lightning strike, moving faster than the speed of light to maneuver behind his enemy. Contact with the beast's skin triggered a system prompt offering the ability to copy the traits of a low-ranking Vargos soldier. He accepted without hesitation, allowing the system to handle the transfer. By the time he landed from a jump, the process was already complete. Using a voice command, the warrior opened his subspace. A vibrant energy materialized before him, likely a C-grade crystal, signaling a valuable discovery. He took the crystal and immediately initiated absorption to boost his core level, his mind focused solely on saving time through this upgrade. As the energy surged through his body and the transformation concluded, Choi Jung-hyuk found himself wondering about the battles that lay ahead. The sun was just beginning to rise across the landscape when he stepped through a portal, returning to the city. Checking his phone, he saw it was 6:55 a.m. He calculated that his current rate of growth would significantly shorten the time required for his second awakening. Suddenly, a growl from his stomach reminded him of his hunger. Moments later, while sharing an elevator with a woman, he opened the system interface to inspect his new skill. The description regarding the recognition of the lowest-ranking soldier initially confused him. However, the explanation clarified that low-tier Vargos soldiers would identify him as one of their own and refuse to attack. As he stepped out and followed the secretary, he mused that this passive ability would be incredibly powerful during solo missions. The woman eventually stopped at a heavy door, smiling kindly as she invited him to enter. Inside, a gray-haired man in a suit appeared delighted to see him. Choi Jung-hyuk walked in with a blend of shyness and composure. The chief gestured for him to sit and make himself comfortable, asking if they could speak informally. Since the man seemed to have already adopted a casual tone, the boy readily agreed. The association president began by commending his punctuality, though he appeared baffled when Jung-hyuk started listing the various household chores he had completed for his siblings. A brief silence fell over the room as the two exchanged glances, but the tension was quickly broken when the chief burst into loud laughter. He realized that the young man's previous words weren't a joke after all. Deciding to get straight to business, the gray-haired man shifted the conversation to his main objective, while the hero listened intently. The president explained that the association had a specific proposal. They wanted him to commit to staying in Korea and reject any recruitment offers from foreign guilds. Choi Jung-hyuk paused to analyze the situation before admitting that, contrary to the man's expectations, he hadn't received any offers from abroad. The president, looking slightly embarrassed, confessed that their system had been hacked. Intelligence suggested that major American guilds had seen the leaked data and were already interested in him, news that came as a complete surprise to the boy. Suspecting a misunderstanding, the young man asked if these organizations were aware of his rank. The president confirmed that everyone knew, but Jung Hyuk remained skeptical. He argued that achieving C rank as a First Awakener wasn't particularly impressive, as he felt he was on the same level as standard Second Awakeners. However, the man corrected him, explaining that if he maximized his stats now, his Second Awakening could propel him to S-rank territory. Because of this potential, the association viewed him as a highly attractive asset and refused to stand by while such talent left the country. The secretary handed over a notebook outlining the terms. The president listed 3 major incentives: an initial support fund of $1 billion, total tax exemption for his group, and 2 pieces of A-rank equipment provided for free. Handing him a pen, the chief stated that the contract would be valid until his Second Awakening. All he had to do was sign. However, the protagonist hesitated. He found it suspicious that they would offer such massive support to a C-rank hunter just to keep him in the city. Unconvinced, he asked if there were any other conditions hidden in the deal. The president rose from his chair, realizing that the young man was far more observant than he had anticipated. Leaning over the table, he laid out the specific restrictions. During the contract period, naturalizing in another country was strictly forbidden. Furthermore, the boy was barred from joining any guilds and was required to consult the association before participating in any expeditions. He emphasized that if the association summoned him for a raid, he had to prioritize that call above all else. Essentially, nothing would be allowed to stand between Choi Jung-hyuk and the organization. These were the final terms, and the president warned that the offer would expire the moment Hyuk contacted any other guild, leaving him little time to deliberate. However, the protagonist fully grasped the situation. Without hesitation, he signed the contract, knowing exactly what his goals were. The man in the suit was confused by this speed and offered him more time to think, but the young man remained firm. They shook hands, officially sealing the deal. Outside, the city streets were packed with people. The scene shifted to a bustling shopping mall where Hyuk had taken his 2 siblings for a family outing. While a girl nearby looked over a restaurant menu, Hyuk's younger brother was ecstatic to be in such a large place, eagerly asking if he could look at some t-shirts. Young Jung seemed anxious about the noise her brother was making, but the hero was simply enjoying the moment. He stunned both children by announcing that they could each choose 10 items to buy. Pure joy washed over their faces as they celebrated the unexpected treat. Despite the happy atmosphere, Hyuk's mind drifted to the potential problems he might face on his journey, noting that he had to wait until his protection period ended. His thoughts were interrupted when young Jung found a beautiful blue dress that Unchul immediately insisted she get. A store employee approached and scolded the children for touching the display items. Hyuk, who had been mentally reviewing a checklist related to his past, stepped in. He told the clerk not to worry, as he intended to purchase the clothes. He reaffirmed to himself that he had absolutely no intention of leaving Korea until he completed his personal list. Suddenly, the shopping trip was cut short by an emergency announcement over the speakers. The voice warned customers that an unexpected gate had opened inside the mall, urging everyone to stay calm and follow the staff's instructions. Amid the throng, a woman announced that hunters from the Taebaek Guild would be arriving shortly. She instructed everyone to remain inside the mall for their safety, but the customers were already desperate to evacuate. However, since the situation outside was even more perilous, following the employee's guidance seemed to be the only viable option. Suddenly, the orderly atmosphere shattered as panic set in, and the crowd began running wildly. Sensing the rising tension, Choi Jung-hyuk assessed the unfolding crisis. As a hunter, he felt compelled to investigate, so he asked the staff member to look after his siblings. His sister, Yoon Jung, was clearly terrified for his safety, warning him that going out there was far too dangerous. Hyuk recalled from his memories that 5 D-rank monsters were lurking near the store. In the original timeline, those creatures had followed refugees into the mall, causing the building to collapse. Trembling with rage at the memory, he crouched down and instructed Yoon Jung to look after her little brother, Yoon Chul. He knew the Taebaek Guild wouldn't arrive until the damage was done, so he headed out, determined to confront the beasts himself. He realized he would have to hold the line alone while anxiously waiting for reinforcements. Meanwhile, the arrival of the monsters threw the streets into absolute despair. An officer tried to calmly direct the crowd into the mall for shelter, but the tension escalated as people began fighting and pushing to move faster. At the same time, the 5 monsters began fanning out across the city, poised to destroy everything in their path. Drawn by the screams, the creatures scanned their surroundings while the terrified mob trampled one another to escape. Choi Jung-hyuk stood firm in the current of fleeing people, allowing them to pass him. A look of desperation crossed his face as he realized he was now entirely on his own. The giant beasts were closing in, and for a moment he wasn't sure of the best defense. With a grim expression, he opened his subspace, creating a portal beside him to select his abilities. A terrifying aura filled the air, radiating the creature's fury, but the young man refused to let any of them pass. He had to protect his brother at all costs. His shield was primed and ready to take down every single enemy. Activating his swift movement skill, he used speed to deceive his opponent. He landed a crushing blow to the creature's leg, causing it to let out a powerful scream of agony. Leveraging his agility, he darted around the area, keeping his enemies confused. He suddenly stopped to assess the battlefield. The abominations turned their massive bodies to track him. Jung-hyuk taunted them, daring them to attack. Irritated by the boy's arrogance, the 5 monsters wasted no time and charged toward their small target. Nearby, traffic was completely gridlocked as vehicles piled up in the street. A driver grew increasingly furious as he realized he wasn't going anywhere. The road was choked with cars trying to flee, and even the police couldn't manage the chaos. Frustrated, the man realized this was the worst possible moment to be stuck in a jam. Suddenly, Desau felt a hand on his shoulder as his colleague tried everything to calm him down. Meanwhile, a live broadcast captured the chaotic battle unfolding in the city, where Jung-hyuk was using every skill he had to hold off the creatures. The young man filming the event commented to his viewers that he was awestruck by the unknown fighter's courage. Inside their car, the men remained glued to their phones, watching the stream intently. Desau instantly recognized the figure on the screen. He told his companion that he actually knew the young man fighting all alone. When his curious colleague asked for the fighter's identity, Desau smiled and explained that the boy was a fan he had met at the association after returning from Thailand, though he admitted he couldn't recall the name. The streamer continued to broadcast the highlights, fully aware that he was risking his own life. He knew that if the fighter fell, he would be the next victim. Despite the danger, he remained professional, recording the urgent situation while asking his followers for donations. The comment section exploded with shock, and one viewer even remarked that not even Desau would be capable of fighting like that. That specific comment bothered Desau, shaking his confidence. Without hesitation, he stepped out of the vehicle, leaving his confused and worried friend behind. Determined to intervene, he moved forward, and soon, other warriors began to gather around him. Although one initially asked him to step aside, the group quickly rallied beside Desau, ready for combat. Desau ordered Jo Hwanwoo to investigate the newcomer, realizing he actually remembered the name, Kim Jun-hyuk. The captain then checked if his team was prepared. Their determined expressions confirmed they were ready to follow orders and protect the citizens. Upon hearing the command, the entire group charged toward the battlefield. Back in the fight, a monster launched a violent strike at the warrior. Although he was fast enough to dodge using his skills, the shockwave knocked him to the ground. Drenched in sweat from the uneven struggle, he silently prayed for help. He realized this was the perfect moment to rely on his super sense. Facing these terrifying and insane abominations, he did his best to avoid recklessness while evading their most lethal attacks. Jun-hyuk sprinted as fast as he could, fully aware that taking on 2 monsters simultaneously was a complex challenge. He slowed his pace, coming to a halt dangerously close to the creature's claws. As the beast roared, seemingly looking for an opening to strike, the protagonist realized his deception had worked. He had successfully tricked the opponent. However, the situation quickly became confusing when the monster launched a surprise attack, attempting to crush him with its massive paw. Just in time, Desau arrived with his team, ready to provide full support. With his stun enhancement active, the veteran used his powerful shield to protect his face as he closed the distance. Channeling all his strength and skill, he landed a heavy blow that left the creature completely disoriented, unable to pinpoint the source of the attack. Jun-hyuk was amazed to find himself fighting alongside his idol. Desau immediately issued orders. Kim Do-hun and Jang Soo-jung were to handle the combat support, while Jae Hwan was tasked with searching for survivors. Do-hun was specifically assigned to heal Jun-hyuk and remain by his side until the battle ended. As the boy sat on the ground to recover, he asked why the guildmaster had taken so long to arrive. Noting that the rookie had enough energy to chatter, Desau concluded he was fit enough to handle 2 more monsters. Once fully healed by Do-hun's power, Jun-hyuk's mission would be to join the group in defending the city. The strategy shifted. Instead of just drawing aggro to stall, Jun-hyuk needed to switch to tanking mode to secure a quick victory. Handing over a shield, Desau ensured the boy understood the plan, emphasizing that any wasted time would only lead to greater destruction. From a distance, they spotted another Cardon sprinting toward them, picking up speed as it approached. The two hunters stood ready to face the threat side by side. Meanwhile, deep in the underground shelters where civilians were hiding, a broadcast announced that the Taebaek Guild had arrived, but had not yet defeated any of the monsters. Hearing this, Yeonjung looked visibly anxious, a reaction noticed by a nearby employee. Eunchul calmly reassured her, insisting there was no need to fear and that the situation would soon be under control. As the siblings worried about Jun-hyuk's safety, a new report came in. The hunting group had finally taken down the first Cardan. The shelter erupted in excitement, and the children cheered, realizing the battle was turning in their favor. Overcome with curiosity, Eunchul walked toward the exit to get a look, but the employee stopped him, warning that it was still far too dangerous to go outside. Before the employee could catch him, the boy dashed away. Shortly after, the group managed to take down another Cardan, leaving only 3 monsters standing. Nearby, 2 men embraced in celebration as they read through a flood of messages from people all over the world. The online discussion praised the Taebaek Guild's efficiency while buzzing with curiosity about the mysterious rookie who had managed to stall 5 monsters for nearly an hour. Hearing this, Eunchul approached the men and revealed that the hunter was his older brother, his voice bursting with pride at Choi Jun-hyuk's skills. By the time night fell, streetlights were the only things illuminating the dark roads, yet the war was not quite over. The warrior continued to sprint across the battlefield, shield in hand. Leaping into the air to distract the Cardan, his weapon shifted into a sharp blade, allowing him to deliver the final blow to the abomination. It had been 7 grueling hours since the chaos began, but the battle had finally come to an end. Jun-hyuk felt the adrenaline fade, replaced by overwhelming exhaustion. He felt as though he might collapse at any second. Desau approached to thank him for his incredible effort, but quickly steered the conversation toward a serious topic. Choosing his words carefully, the guildmaster asked if Jun-hyuk was the first awakener who had recently received a C-rank classification. Sensing the gravity of the moment, the protagonist straightened up. Desau then probed further, questioning if the young man might be an irregular, which left Jun-hyuk looking confused. The tension was broken when a voice called out, "Brother!" The shelter doors opened, and his siblings emerged alongside the mall employee. Seeing his family, Jun-hyuk called back to them, and the children rushed into his arms, safe and sound. They shared a warm, relieved hug after the terror they had endured, and Jun-hyuk told them how proud he was of their bravery. Meanwhile, Desau received a background report on the boy but found nothing suspicious in the data. Deciding to set aside his worries, the hero focused on the joy of the moment. They decided to get food before heading home. While Eunchul was excited about chicken, Yeonjun wanted something different, so Jun-hyuk promised they could eat whatever they liked. Suddenly, the employee who had been watching the reunion stepped forward. She thanked him for his hard work and for protecting everyone. However, Jun-hyuk insisted that he should be the one thanking her for watching over his siblings. Overcome with emotion, the woman hugged him unexpectedly, tears streaming down her face in gratitude, leaving Choi Jun-hyuk blushing with embarrassment. It didn't take long for the locals to spot the famous hunter, with many commenting on how charming and handsome he looked in person. As a crowd gathered, pushing forward to thank the hero who had saved the city, Choi Jun-hyuk felt bewildered, unable to grasp how his identity had become public knowledge so quickly. Under a cloudy but peaceful sky, the news playing inside the office focused on the recent events in Seoul. The television broadcast detailed the appearance of 5 S-rank monsters and highlighted the team that defended the city, specifically mentioning Choi Jun-hyuk. The report announced that the judges had unanimously awarded him a high-ranking score based on his performance. The association president interrupted the moment, teasing the new celebrity about his rising fame. However, the warrior didn't appreciate the joke and asked the man to stop. Curious, the president asked if he was overwhelmed by the attention following the gate incident, explaining that the association had already intercepted numerous recruitment calls that morning to protect him. He added that if the aftermath of the battle became too stressful, the boy should reach out to him directly. Shifting the topic, the older man revealed that government authorities were classifying Jun-hyuk as an irregular, a type of mutant who broke conventional ranking rules without necessarily being stronger than an S rank. When Jun-hyuk asked if he needed to register, the president explained that while registering in the United States offered the best government support, it was notoriously difficult. Many applied, but only 3 had ever succeeded. Furthermore, leaving Korea wasn't a viable option for Jun-hyuk, given his responsibility to care for his 2 siblings. Consequently, they moved on to discussing an updated contract. Since the previous agreement was designed for a rookie, the association proposed new terms suitable for an irregular. Although the warrior suggested waiting for official confirmation of his status, the president insisted it wasn't necessary. The new offer included an increased support fund of $5 billion, the same tax breaks, 5 A-rank equipment rentals, and a top-tier hunting vehicle, all under the original conditions. Despite the generous offer, Choi Jun-hyuk looked at the deal with suspicion, prompting the president to try and read the boy's expression. Breaking his silence, Jun-hyuk asked about the hunting vehicle, specifically inquiring if he could receive it that very day. Moments later, a white vehicle could be seen speeding rapidly down the highway. While driving his new car, Jun-hyuk placed a call to Desau, the tanker from the Tae-bike Guild. Although the older man had previously offered his assistance should the boy ever need it, Jun-hyuk's actual motive was to arrange a face-to-face meeting. Desau picked up, and they agreed to meet immediately. Jun-hyuk opened a portal to Stegania using his subspace ability, estimating that the transit through the energy field would take about 10 minutes. As he waited, he examined the cards in his hand. He had originally decided against selling Kieran's Blessing and Mount Splitting due to their immense value, hoping instead to absorb the abilities himself. Unfortunately, the system had rejected the attempt because of user incompatibility. Since the recent gate incident had shifted the public spotlight from the guildmaster to himself, Jun-hyuk felt he owed a debt to the man who had saved his life. To repay this, he decided to offer Desau the Mount Splitting tanker skill card. When Desau heard about the offer, he was stunned, noting that only 9 such cards existed in the entire world. He warned that using the skill required extreme caution to avoid taking damage. Jun-hyuk remained optimistic, offering the item at a reasonable price, though he admitted he had an ulterior motive. When the curious tanker asked what he wanted in return, Jun-hyuk explained that once Desau mastered the skill, all he required was a simple handshake. Later, inside a pristine office, the hero presented the rare card. Desau stared at the item in disbelief. He knew it was worth at least $40 billion, and likely far more at an auction. He struggled to understand why the boy would let it go for such a low price, finding the logic confusing. However, Jun-hyuk had made up his mind. He reasoned that selling to a stranger felt wrong compared to giving it to someone he respected, especially since he planned to copy the skill from Desau later anyway. After considering the proposal, they agreed on a sum of $20 billion. Desau asked if Jun-hyuk preferred cash or if he wanted to trade for items. The boy briefly considered asking for new equipment, but the negotiation took a different turn. Shortly after, the group stood before a massive glass building priced at $42 billion. They asked if Jun-hyuk was interested in a real estate deal. As the protagonist weighed the possibility of becoming a landlord, the guild master stepped up beside him to start a conversation. Smiling, the guild master asked if the property met the boy's standards. Jun-hyuk remained silent for a moment, eyeing the proposal with a hint of suspicion, but they eventually stopped stalling. The deal was struck. The boy accepted the building in exchange for the skill card. Visibly thrilled with the trade, the master was suddenly enveloped by a powerful surge of energy that filled the room. Jun-hyuk watched the process with delight as the system confirmed that the hunter had acquired the new ability without a hitch. This achievement made Lee Desau the only tanker in Asia, aside from China's Wang Weichong, to master the Mount Splitting skill, a feat that would undoubtedly boost his ranking. The two men shook hands to finalize the agreement. Curious about the future, Desau asked how the young man intended to use the building. Jun-hyuk explained that he planned to work as a mercenary, though his current priority was to stick to safer hunts in beginner zones. Despite his newfound wealth, he couldn't ignore the dangers of the world, especially since he had siblings to protect. He recalled how their parents had died during the Great Catastrophe, plunging the 3 of them into a nightmarish childhood. Determined to break that cycle, Jun-hyuk stated that he wanted to give his siblings a future defined by freedom and financial security, rather than the hardships of the past. Although Desau was moved by the boy's maturity and backstory, he felt compelled to shatter that illusion. The veteran hunter warned that such a peaceful life was impossible, arguing that the Great Catastrophe was merely the beginning of the world's slow march toward destruction. He pointed out that monster invasions were becoming more frequent, just as combat resources were running dry. To make matters worse, cities were plagued by human threats like thieves and assassins. Desau mentioned a recent string of hunter murders in the Gangnam district, reportedly committed by Shijin-soo, a notorious villain from Daegu. Frustrated, Desau remarked that fighting monsters was hard enough without having to deal with human enemies. He concluded that Jun-hyuk's siblings didn't need a building. They needed a world free from monsters and the awakened. Elsewhere, silence surrounded a small, isolated structure. Inside, an injured soldier waited anxiously for the association to send help. A hooded figure suddenly emerged from the darkness, and the soldier instantly recognized him as the infamous Shijin-su. Smiling, the villain confirmed that he operated in various regions, including Daegu. Realizing he was in grave danger, the wounded fighter froze as the assassin began to mock him, taunting that his comrades had completely abandoned him. Refusing to waste another second, the warrior raised his weapon and rushed at the villain. However, his opponent was too quick. The villain dodged the strike and immediately countered with a precise blow to the soldier's stomach. The man collapsed to the ground, overcome by intense pain. Shijin-su knew he couldn't linger because the soldier had already called for backup, but he paused to ask a curious question. He wanted to know if the soldier was familiar with a man named Choi Jung-hyuk. Instead of answering, the soldier simply told him to go to hell. Realizing the man had no useful information, the assassin delivered a fatal blow to his throat, wearing a wide, satisfied grin. After claiming his victim, he turned to leave, but stopped to check his phone. The screen displayed footage of the recent battle against the 5 monsters. With his face still covered in blood, he watched for a moment and, unexpectedly, clicked the like button on the video before bursting into menacing laughter. A week later, a terrifying monster appeared in the beginner hunting zone of Goyang City, ready to attack. Using all his strength, the boy blocked the creature's assault, marking the beginning of the end for the day's last target. Spectators watched from a distance as the team held their formation, with an archer standing by for support. Inside the arena, one of the young men touched his companion's arm and signaled that it was time for the final blow. Determined to end the fight, the boy sprinted forward, gaining speed as he activated his unique Power Strike, Level 1. Energy poured from his weapon as he unleashed a massive attack, engulfing the enemy in flames until it disintegrated completely. Jumyuk was notified that only one monster remained. He struck the dying creature one last time and immediately charged toward the final enemy. Despite having a twisted arm, the beast prepared to counterattack. At that moment, the man signaled Seo Yejin. The archer reacted instantly, aiming at the monster's head and firing a high-velocity arrow that pierced right through its skull. The group battle had taken 2 hours and 20 minutes. Although he knew he could have finished much faster on his own, Jumyuk had to be cautious because of the rumors regarding his status as an irregular. After the fight, the armored man approached to congratulate him, admitting that the hunt was far easier than expected thanks to his help. Jumyuk thanked him for the invitation, but his companion simply expressed how impressed he was by the boy's rapid progress as both a mercenary and an irregular. Driven by ambition, the protagonist actually aimed to organize a guild, hoping to glean as much wisdom as possible from the experienced warrior. Although the man initially insisted that a guild was vastly different from a simple team, the boy argued that their organizational structures were quite similar, causing the veteran to rethink his stance. Consequently, the man changed his mind and made a surprising offer. He wanted Choi Jong-hyuk to take over as the team leader. The protagonist was initially puzzled by the suggestion. The veteran explained that he was planning to graduate from the beginner's zone soon and could not remain there indefinitely, making Choi the perfect candidate to step up. He added that even though it wasn't a full guild, it was a great chance to gain leadership experience. A female member chimed in, stating that since they all owed him their lives, he was more than qualified. The young man beside her agreed, expressing his gratitude for the help during the battle. Seeing that the group was in favor, the leader officially handed over the position. Despite his lingering confusion, the team trusted his potential, leaving him with the sole responsibility of making decisions that would benefit them all. Before parting ways, the former leader issued a warning about a villain targeting hunters. He advised keeping emergency contacts ready, as the association was struggling to form a response team. He then suggested grabbing some drinks to chat, but the plan was cut short when the protagonist received an urgent phone call. The caller mentioned his brother, Yun Chil. Although the conversation felt endless, he listened carefully to every word. When he hung up with a serious expression, he told his confused armored companion that the drinks would have to wait. The scene shifted to a quiet school, devoid of students. Inside a classroom, Jun Hyuk met with a concerned teacher who explained that Yun Chil had been losing focus and getting into conflicts with friends recently. She had called him because the behavior was escalating. Jun Hyuk was upset to hear about the trouble at school, especially when the teacher revealed that the verbal arguments were turning into physical fights. She added that the child had justified his actions by claiming he simply wanted to become stronger, just like his father. Jun Hyuk was stunned to learn that Yun Chil wanted to awaken as a tanker, specifically to become as strong as their father. This revelation made the hunter realize that simply scolding the boy or issuing warnings was not the right way to handle his education. Sensing the shift in the atmosphere, the teacher attempted to wrap up the meeting on a positive note by asking Jun-hyuk for a favor. She explained that the school occasionally invited parents to act as teachers for a day and suggested that his participation would be incredibly beneficial. Since the students were currently fascinated by the hunter profession, she believed it would be a great experience for him to share his stories while highlighting the job's real difficulties and dangers. Outside the classroom, Yoon-chil was waiting alone in the hallway. When his brother emerged, the child watched him with a mix of curiosity and anxiety. Before Jun-hyuk could even speak, the boy rushed to apologize for fighting. He explained that his classmates had called him a liar because they refused to believe the famous tanker on TV was actually his brother, arguing that it was impossible since he had no parents. Seeing the genuine distress on the boy's face, Jun-hyuk reached out to comfort him. He assured Yoon-chil that he wasn't angry and suggested that he invite those friends over later for a delicious meal. Hearing this, the child's eyes filled with tears, and he immediately ran to hug his older brother, leaving Jun-hyuk briefly confused by the intense emotional reaction. Gazing out at the city, the hunter reflected that if his younger brother was destined to become a hunter, there was likely nothing he could do to stop it, just as he had eventually become a villain. The dream of a peaceful, hopeful life felt incredibly distant as he recalled Desau's grim warnings. He remembered the man saying that the great catastrophe was only the beginning of the world's destruction, pointing to the dwindling resources, the rising number of monsters, and the constant threat of villains. He thought about what his siblings needed, wishing for a reality where monsters and the awakened didn't exist. However, as he activated his magic circle and teleported away, he accepted that such a world was impossible. Reappearing near his white vehicle, he continued to worry about how to protect his family from the evil surrounding them. His biggest fears were dying in battle or ending up in prison again. He climbed into the car, turned on the headlights, and sped onto the highway, concluding that his siblings would ultimately have to learn how to fend for themselves. While driving, he made a mysterious call to Haisu to ask for a favor, specifically inquiring if there were frequent hunter patrols monitoring the beginner zones in the Gangnam area. Haisu soon confirmed that the request had been fulfilled, reporting that the team led by tanker Cho Ju-sung was currently hunting near the four-way intersection in Gangnam. The hero, however, was already on site, silently observing the ruined cityscape from his car. As he stepped out, he told Haisu that his team planned to head to that area shortly, though he withheld the specific reasons why. He admitted that it might look like they were trying to encroach on another group's territory, but he thanked her for the intel and promised to keep in touch before hanging up. Once he was set up, he began mapping the location using a low-power search mode. He had resolved that if he couldn't provide a normal world for his brothers, he would at least exterminate the cockroaches that were destroying it, applying his full determination to the task. Suddenly, he spotted the perfect target in one of the buildings. Aiming his weapon with precision, he released an arrow that gathered momentum as it sliced through the air. Moments later, the projectile pierced the heart of a warrior who was distracted by a fight against monsters, causing blood to gush from his mouth as the attack struck him from behind. Through an earpiece, the protagonist could hear the chaotic confusion over the radio as the team tried to grasp what had just happened. On the other end, Cho Jin-soo seemed to revel in the gruesome situation. He believed that the death of a single tanker was no excuse for the rest of the squad to flee. As the assassin prepared his next move, a threatening voice interrupted him. He spun around, attempting to fire an arrow into the dark corridor behind him, but he saw no one. Cho Jin-soo called out, demanding to know who was there. Jun-hyuk stepped out of the shadows and addressed the assassin directly, leaving the man baffled that a stranger knew his identity. The protagonist grabbed the enemy's weapon, rendering him speechless, and slowly revealed his face. Although the assassin didn't recognize him yet, Jun-hyuk knew it was only a matter of time. The confused villain asked if he was being messed with, but Jun-hyuk simply snapped the arrow and tossed it aside to demonstrate his strength. He then leveled a serious accusation against the assassin, claiming he had betrayed them by selling information on villain locations and forcing the premature use of a returned stone. Hearing this, the assassin realized that the young man was talking about things that seemed like total nonsense to him. Despite the protagonist's words, the situation remained unchanged. Although Cho Jin-soo was frightened by the confrontation, he wasn't about to back down. Instead, he charged forward to attack. The warrior stood his ground, calmly watching the movement while his enemy approached rapidly, anticipating a fight. Jun-hyuk seemed to welcome the assault, waiting eagerly for each strike. Jin-soo attempted a quick, precise hand strike followed immediately by a predatory kick, but when those failed to connect, he tried leaping at his opponent. The assassin grew confused as he realized none of his attacks were landing. Seeing his perplexed expression, the hero continued to taunt him. Shocked by the young man's audacity, Jin-soo turned, only to be met with a furious punch to the face. As pain radiated through his body, he touched his injured cheek in embarrassment. Smiling, Jun-hyuk remarked that his opponent wouldn't be needing that meal anymore from this day forward. Reaching into his pocket, Cho Jin-soo pulled out a tool and triggered a device that filled the area with smoke. The unexpected move left Jun-hyuk blind, unable to see anything in front of him. Seizing the moment, the assassin drew a sharp weapon and approached the protagonist from behind. However, while Jun-hyuk was irritated by the lack of visibility, he had a trick prepared. He activated his super sense. Unaware of this countermeasure, Jin-soo launched his attack, convinced victory was his. He aimed a full-force strike at the victim's neck, but the hero abruptly blocked the movement. Baffled by the turn of events, the assassin felt lost. Using his superior skill, the warrior grabbed his enemy and slammed him to the ground before delivering another blow to his face. He noted that villains were all the same, always trying to dominate by attacking the neck from behind. After striking his enemy, Jun-hyuk rubbed his eyes, still bothered by the strange substance in the smoke. Meanwhile, the villain desperately begged for his life, offering to trade all the items he had collected in exchange for mercy. However, the young man coldly replied that he already knew the exact location where those stolen goods were stored. Unable to move, the assassin lay there, increasingly impressed by his opponent's capabilities. Jun-hyuk reflected on his past life as a villain, where he had killed many awakened individuals and converted their items into cash. Fueled by this resolve, he was determined to end Jin-soo's life right there. Although the assassin continued to plead for mercy, the protagonist remained indifferent, reasoning that in a completely destroyed world, such things were meaningless. Later, the body of the wanted assassin, Cho Jin-soo, was dumped in front of a police station. The latest news reports subsequently announced that the prime suspect in the Gangnam serial murders had been arrested the previous night. The hunter watched the news coverage of Jin-soo's arrest on his phone, a satisfied smile playing on his lips as he absorbed every detail. He reflected on the past, noting that before his regression, his power level had been equal to Cho Jin-soo's. Now, however, there was a massive gap in their stats, a difference of 100 points, which meant he could easily tear the villain apart like paper. The broadcast highlighted the public's relief, featuring an interview with a hunter who admitted that operating in Gangnam had been terrifying. With the assassin caught, the interviewee expressed great relief that he could finally focus on his hunts without fear. Moments later, the association president arrived, apologizing for his lateness. Jun-hyuk dismissed the apology casually, though the older man was already suspicious that the meeting, requested by the protagonist himself, signaled trouble. Shrugging off the concern, the hunter stated he simply wanted to discuss adjustments to their contract. However, the gray-haired president was alarmed when the boy revealed his actual intent: to terminate the agreement completely. Jun-hyuk explained that, unfortunately, the promise he had made to the association would have to be broken. Under the bright sunlight, Jun-hyuk sped down the highway in his car, smiling faintly as he drove. He eventually arrived at a house where his ringing doorbell woke up a young man inside. When the door opened, the boy was shocked to see who it was and immediately bowed deeply in respect. Jun-hyuk jokingly commented that the boy looked like a gangster, but then explained that he was actually there to speak with his grandmother. The boy shouted for the elderly woman, urging her to hurry because the visitor had important news. Once they were all seated calmly in the kitchen, Jun-hyuk placed a colorful, powerful crystal on the table. He informed them that it was a dealer's awakening stone, an incredibly expensive item worth approximately 1 billion. The grandmother was stunned, unable to comprehend how a young man could possess such a treasure. Jun-hyuk then revealed his plan. With her permission, he wanted to give the stone to Chang-soo. Seeing the confusion on their faces, the hero explained that he required a trustworthy ally to handle difficult tasks, and he was convinced that Chang-soo was the right person for the job. The elderly woman was initially reluctant, viewing her grandson as clumsy and prone to finding trouble since childhood. However, she acknowledged that despite his clumsiness, he was loyal and would never betray anyone. She noted that he had eventually gained respectability by working as a porter in dangerous zones. Even with Jun-hyuk's promises of protection, she remained skeptical about granting permission. It was only after seeing the young man's persistence that she finally yielded to the conditions. Overjoyed, Chang-soo expressed immense gratitude to his grandmother, who added a final stipulation. He was not to act like an awakened individual without a valid reason. Jun Hyuk then clarified that he operated as a private mercenary, independent of the association. This confused the boy, who asked if the organization minded such an arrangement. Privately, the protagonist knew that the association actually preferred to avoid involvement in that specific line of work. His mind drifted back to his discussion with the president regarding these plans. He recalled explaining that while standard mercenary work required opening a registered business for tax purposes, his situation was unique. Consequently, he had asked the president for permission to register a guild instead. Realization dawned on the gray-haired man as he understood why the boy wanted to terminate their contract. He worried that if a guild were registered and then mismanaged, it could lead to damaging rumors about tax evasion. Puzzled by Jun Hyuk's desire to create his own guild, the president warned that given the association's previous support, he would not be able to offer further assistance in this matter. This left Jun Hyuk unsure of his next move. Furthermore, the president couldn't grasp why someone with so much money would want to pursue mercenary work. With determination, the young man explained that having the ability to act creates a desire to expand one's impact. He had recently realized that hunting monsters made a tangible difference. His ultimate goal as a hunter was to eliminate as many threats as possible before he died, thereby leaving the world a better place. Hearing this, the president finally began to understand his true intentions. Breaking the serious mood, he called for Jun Hyuk's attention and simply asked if he had come all the way to the association just to talk about cockroaches. The president recommended seizing the opportunity to register the guild immediately, noting that it would streamline future requests for assistance. He argued that establishing an official channel would prevent potential awkwardness or misunderstandings between them. Flashing a faint smile and a wink, he paused for a reaction, and Jun Hyuk seemed quite satisfied with the offer. Back in the present, Jun Hyuk reassured the group that he had already settled matters with the association. Chang-soo looked shocked by the news, prompting his grandmother to smack him on the back of the neck for doubting the protagonist. She trusted Jun Hyuk implicitly, knowing he was not the type to lie. After outlining his plans to leave soon, the elderly woman immediately agreed, encouraging him to move to a better environment. However, Jun Hyuk suddenly invited her to join them. Since the death of his parents, she had been a pillar of trust for him and the children, and he worried she would be lonely without Chang-soo. She declined the offer, shrugging as she pointed out that she was perfectly happy in her own home. She insisted that he should simply focus on living a good life with his brothers. Accepting her refusal, Jun Hyuk stood up and performed a deep, respectful bow. He expressed his immense gratitude for her motherly care, a gesture that made the elderly woman beam with happiness. A week later, preparations were complete, and the two young men stood before a door, ready to begin their joint adventure. Chang-soo commented that they looked incredibly stylish, though the warrior told him to curb his enthusiasm. The sign on the door read, JHA Mercenary Organization, revealing a spacious, modern, and minimalist office featuring carpeted floors and fluorescent lighting. As they sat down to share a bowl of noodles, Chang-soo seemed surprised by the meal's presentation. Jun Hyuk advised him to eat up, as they had a busy afternoon ahead. The boy quickly clasped his hands to offer a prayer of thanks to Hyun-nim, but then hurriedly corrected himself, directing his gratitude toward the awakening stone instead. Sitting beside him, the hero felt puzzled by Chang-soo's strange behavior. The boy was profusely thanking him for the awakening stone, noting its immense value, but the hunter cut him off to clarify that the item wasn't actually his to begin with. Stunned by this admission, Chang-soo pressed for more details. The protagonist explained that he had acquired the stone from a co-worker who was in debt, but since it was a long story, he insisted they finish their noodles before the food went cold. Just then, a girl walked into the room and noticed the two men eating. She was accompanied by a red-haired woman who immediately congratulated them on launching their mercenary group. The hunter recognized her as Kang Ji-yeon from the Genesis Guild. It was their first time seeing each other since the awakening test at the association. Chang-soo was clearly struck by the girl's beauty, and she appeared quite shy as she accepted the unspoken compliment. She began to explain how she had managed to locate their office, but she was suddenly interrupted. Master Lee Desau barged in, leaving Jun Hyuk even more shocked to see the veteran standing there. Smiling, the master chided the protagonist for not mentioning the grand opening. The surprise was so effective that Jun Hyuk couldn't even bring himself to finish his meal. Kang Ji-yeon then held up her phone to show a flood of messages she had received from Chang-soo, who had introduced himself and solicited support for the group. The boy nervously tried to justify his actions as necessary marketing and promotion, but Jun Hyuk grew increasingly annoyed by his chatter. Although Lee Desau sided with the boy's promotional efforts, the protagonist insisted he had intended to keep the operation small. The master then teased them for sitting around eating instant noodles on such a lovely day. Flustered, John Hyuk admitted that he would have prepared a proper feast had he known guests were coming. To his surprise, Lee Desau revealed that he had already arranged for a catering service as a thoughtful gift, prompting the hero to thank him for his generosity. Soon after, another girl named Haisu arrived to offer her well wishes. She expressed disbelief that the young man actually owned the building, admitting that holding such an investment at his age was enviable. Her comments made the protagonist blush, as he realized he was getting special treatment simply for being a landlord. While Kang John-hyuk watched the interaction with intrigue, Haesu asked how he planned to balance the Hunts group with his new mercenary work. He assured her that he had a perfect strategy to divide the tasks without neglecting either side. However, their conversation was cut short when Kang John-hyuk stepped in, pushing the girl aside to interfere. Suddenly, Kang John-hyuk requested a private moment with the hunter. Pressed for time, her manner came across as slightly rude, which clearly irritated Haesu. Despite her annoyance at the woman's attitude, Haesu agreed to the request and stormed out of the room. Once they were alone, Kang John-hyuk clarified that she hadn't come just to offer congratulations. She actually had a favor to ask. She revealed that the Genesis Guild had a ranked mission available. Choi John-hyuk was impressed by the offer, fully aware that the tankers in her organization were more than capable of handling such a task themselves. When she mentioned that the fee was set at 1 million plus a percentage, Chang-soo couldn't help but interrupt. He exclaimed that for a first job, a payout reaching $1 billion was an incredibly abundant amount of money. Turning down an offer from the guild was generally considered bad luck, so most people wouldn't dare refuse. The girl waited for their official answer, adding that the funds were available immediately. Although Choi John-hyuk felt suspicious about the situation, he decided to accept the job, but he laid out 2 conditions. For his first condition, he proposed that she purchase a skill card from him. Upon hearing him mention Blessing of Salon, a buffer-type skill, her eyes lit up with recognition. Her assistant quickly ran a check and confirmed the item had an estimated value of around 13 billion. Choi John-hyuk offered to show her the card right away, but Kang John-hyuk wanted to know the second condition first. He stood up and explained that after she learned the skill, she simply had to shake his hand. She took a moment to reflect on the terms before agreeing. They shook hands to seal the deal, acknowledging that the agreement would bring benefits to both of them. The following day, they arrived in the upper zone of the Gangnam area, a landscape marked by ruins and destruction. Energy began to swirl around them as a portal opened, depositing countless warriors ready for the hunt. Choi John-hyuk questioned the method of travel, noting that people usually took cars to reach these zones. He observed that while most guilds possessed only one teleporter, she had managed to teleport them directly to an advanced area. Focusing on the task at hand, they needed to plan their attack on the monsters. The boy opened his map and pointed out that the nearest targets were located in 3 main spots. The issue was that 2 of them were clustered very close together, while the remaining one was much farther away. Assessing the situation, Kang John-hyuk suggested that they should head toward the location with the single monster first. However, it turned out that the Taebaek Guild had already claimed those 2 specific spots, while other nearby areas were occupied by rival groups. Hunter Lee Desau had acted quickly to secure the territory the moment he learned John Hyuk was arriving. The protagonist realized that the established guilds viewed his presence as a significant threat. Visibly nervous, the boy explained that Desau had actually asked them to take charge of that specific location. Kang John-hyuk, however, was unhappy with this arrangement and declared that she intended to confront the master about it. Her attention soon shifted elsewhere, but the hero remained completely unfazed by the predicament. To her surprise, he proposed taking on 2 monsters simultaneously. He was determined, reasoning that since he had handled difficult battles before, this challenge was manageable and not nearly as problematic as it seemed. Meanwhile, a monster was tearing through the city with its razor-sharp claws. Amidst the chaos, the hunter stood firm with his shield, bracing for the enemy's furious onslaught. The girls watching from the sidelines were unconcerned. Their leader had assured them of the young man's capabilities, noting that as an irregular, he had previously survived fighting 5 monsters at once. One of the girls remarked that her colleague was worrying too much, insisting that John Hyuk was a genuinely good person. She noted that while famous tankers were usually arrogant and self-absorbed, Mr. Choi was different because he had humbly greeted every member of the guild. Despite this praise, Kang Ji-eun remained skeptical. Suddenly, a call came in, ordering everyone to prepare for the attack once the signal was given. John Hyuk began using his skills to weaken the enemy, darting across the battlefield, but the strength of the two creatures was overwhelming. He barely managed to dodge a strike aimed at his body. He realized that he couldn't use his copied skills or the abilities he had received from Park Gang-ho. With no time to dwell on these limitations, he kept running. He had anticipated a tough fight, but handling two monsters at once was proving to be an immense burden. Raising his shield, he prepared himself and released a massive surge of power amidst the destruction, creating the perfect opening to attack. As the other guild members emerged from their hiding spots, they watched the scene in shock. Drenched in sweat, John Hyuk thought about how impossible this battle would have been without Yeomyeon's ring. He knew Changsu would be disappointed if he ever found out that acquiring this item had been John Hyuk's primary objective. The ring provided incredible bonuses, including a 10,000-point boost to his health and a regeneration rate of 1,000 HP per second, giving him resilience comparable to a zombie. Rusted cars lay scattered across the totally destroyed city. After the team collected their rewards, they scanned the surrounding area one last time. Breaking the silence, Kang Jae-hyun announced that the payment had been successfully processed. John Hyuk checked his phone to verify the deposit and asked if their work was officially done. Smiling, the girl thanked him for his assistance with the job. With the Genesis Guild's first mission complete, the protagonist walked away with a bit more money in his pocket. Soon, offers for contracts and tasks began pouring in from guilds of every size. The scarcity of tankers was making missions difficult to complete, especially since most D-rank tankers in the region were already sponsored by major organizations. During one encounter, a heavy blow to the face sent the young man flying backward, but he kept going. He spent an entire month hunting without a break. He took on mercenary work, joined his team for hunts, or simply went out alone when there were no other options. Eventually, he realized he was reaching his physical limit and couldn't continue down this long road by himself. Suddenly, a surge of energy overwhelmed his body. The system announced that his second awakening was complete, awarding him skill points and an additional core. As his body underwent a transformation, he also inherited a random skill from the previous user, Park Kang-ho. Standing amidst the ruins of partially destroyed buildings, he reviewed the system's notifications. It highlighted improvements such as increased efficiency and reduced cooldown times, along with a significant boost to his vitality and strength. As he chewed on a protein bar, he strategized on how to distribute his points to upgrade his skills. He navigated through the menu, curious about what a third awakening might look like, and began to suspect that other changes had occurred as well. He examined the new information closely and discovered Skill Combination Level 1, a feature that allowed him to merge two general skills into a new ability. Realizing how incredible this function was, he immediately tried to blend two different but complementary powers. His eyes lit up when he saw he could fuse Lightning Flash with Mountain Split. Finishing his snack, he concluded that the possibilities for creating new skills were endless, but he decided to remain calm and study the changes carefully. The final upgrade was the ability to copy skills without any physical contact. He recalled the handshake he had planned with Kang Ji-yeon to get her skill. Now, he wouldn't need to touch anyone to acquire their powers. If the second awakening provided this much strength, he couldn't help but wonder what the third would bring. He was finally ready to test the ability that intrigued him the most, Valkyrie Summon. Inherited from Park Kang-ho, this maximum level skill allowed him to conjure a Valkyrie based on his own raw attributes. As he stood there, a system prompt suddenly appeared, offering a simple choice between yes and no. The protagonist accepted without hesitation, reasoning that he couldn't possibly refuse such an offer. Moments later, spiraling beams of blue light filled the air as a portal began to materialize. The energy was so intense that the warrior could barely watch as a beautiful female figure took shape within the light. When the process was complete, the fully formed Valkyrie addressed him as Lord, leaving Jun Hyuk speechless and genuinely shocked as he checked the system interface. The screen indicated that he could name the entity, but he noticed her status window was oddly blank, showing no skills or equipment. The woman explained that he was responsible for filling those empty slots, and that any gear he provided would be applied directly to her. Understanding the task, Jun Hyuk activated his subspace and leaned into the red energy to search for useful items while the Valkyrie waited patiently. Standing amidst the ruins of the decayed city, the Valkyrie was soon outfitted with new armor. Although the gear wasn't quite to her taste, the hero asked her to bear with it. He checked the system again and filled another slot by giving her a pair of boots, apologizing that he didn't possess many items designed specifically for women. Noticing that the name field remained empty, he paused to think before asking if she had a previous name. She replied that her former master, Park Kang-ho, had called her Park Ji-young. However, the warrior wasn't fond of the choice, even after she explained that she had been named after her former master's younger sister. Jun-hyuk was stunned by this revelation, as he had no idea Park Kang-ho even had a younger sister. The news triggered a buried memory from the distant past, reminding him of the man's dying wish. Park had handed him a photograph and begged him to find his family, making Jun-hyuk promise to take care of them if they were still alive. He knew that breaking such a solemn vow was out of the question. He wouldn't be able to forgive himself even in death. By this time, the sun had disappeared behind a cloudy sky. Since the rules allowed for a name change if the previous one felt awkward, Jun-hyuk suggested calling her Sarah because it was easy to pronounce. She accepted the new title with a smile, assuring him that any name he chose would be perfect. Moving on to logistics, he asked if she needed constant commands during a fight or if she was capable of acting independently. Sarah explained that while she could adapt to the situation on her own, she would always prioritize his specific orders during tough battles. Curious about her history, he asked what kind of combat style Park Kang-ho had preferred. She explained that under her previous master, she had served primarily as a frontline defender. Jun-hyuk immediately pulled up the map to survey the area, wondering if they should hunt a monster to test their new dynamic. Meanwhile, a creature was wandering peacefully through the city streets, unaware that a warrior was about to step into its path. Jun-hyuk realized that because his style differed from Park Kang-ho's, he would need offensive assistance rather than defensive cover. Floating above him, Sarah listened to his instructions and began charging her weapon, fully aware of the dangers but knowing she could be restored if she fell in combat. From the ground, he ordered her to focus entirely on dealing damage. The monster let out a shriek as it prepared to engage, prompting the protagonist to raise his shield. He instructed Sarah to wait for his signal to use lightning flash. Seeing that she understood the plan, he watched the monster approach and then leaped into action. Activating the ability, he instantly teleported behind the giant creature. He decided that Mountain Split was the most suitable follow-up move, noting that the combined efficiency boosts from his core and ring now exceeded 100%. As the fight progressed, he realized he didn't need to hold the enemy's aggro for as long as he used to. Seizing the moment, he launched a shield attack that flew at catastrophic speed, smashing directly into the creature's face. He signaled Sarah to attack, and since she was already prepped for combat, she wasted no time. Flying at top speed, the Valkyrie activated Lightning Flash to position herself directly behind the beast. She immediately followed up by swinging her sharp spear and unleashing the Mountain Split skill. The impact was so severe that the monster's eyes nearly bulged from its skull as pain surged through its entire body. This powerful strategy proved effective, eliminating the enemy completely. As the creature slowly faded away, the duo exchanged a meaningful glance, convinced that with the Valkyrie's help, tackling D-rank threats was now a realistic goal. Later, while walking through the quiet blocks of Tool Street, Jun-hyuk learned something new about his companion. Hearing her voice through the system, he realized Sarah possessed genuine emotions. She explained that Valkyries weren't artificial. They were originally humans, selected for their extraordinary feats from a world that had been destroyed. Upon reaching his destination, he was greeted by an employee with short hair and glasses. He explained that he had come seeking a talented master craftsman he'd heard rumors about. However, the woman immediately turned him down, stating that the shop was currently not accepting any new production orders. Her attitude shifted instantly, however, when he mentioned S-rank equipment. Visibly shocked, she asked him to repeat himself. He clarified that he wanted gear crafted using materials harvested from B-rank monsters. Stunned that such a young man possessed such rare items, she pressed him for his source. He refused to reveal his secrets, simply stating that he would take his business to another shop if necessary. Realizing she had overstepped, the employee quickly apologized for her curiosity and got down to business. He outlined his specific request: a set of armor for himself, a female-sized set, and portable shields. To proceed, she asked for the female measurements. After thinking for a moment, the warrior estimated the height at around 1.70 meters. However, the question about bust size caused him to pause and consult the Valkyrie via the system. Blushing furiously, he eventually relayed that the size would be a B. With all the necessary details collected, the craftswoman estimated the timeline. Since working with B-rank materials was complex, she explained that the process would take approximately 5 months. Jun-hyuk calculated that his current gear would suffice for the time being, especially since there were still 6 months before the next gate appeared. Satisfied with the arrangement, he extended his hand to seal the deal and handed over the materials for production. Before leaving the shop, He asked for directions to the Dabag detective agency. The girl provided the best route, though she couldn't help but wonder what business the boy had with a private investigator. When he arrived at the address, he found a building with closed gates. Inside, a man sat calmly reading the daily newspaper. Without even looking up at his potential client, he asked the reason for the visit. Instead of speaking, Choi Jung-hyuk simply placed a photograph on the table. Lowering his paper, the detective listened as the young man explained that he needed to find the brown-haired woman in the picture, whose name was Park Ji-young. A week later, sunlight streamed through the windows of a personal training room where two warriors stood ready with their weapons. Sarah took to the air, using her shield offensively to strike a monster directly in the face. She called out that the opening was perfect, prompting her master to attack immediately. Utilizing lightning flash, he sprinted forward and delivered a crushing mountain-split blow, inflicting severe injuries on the creature. To his satisfaction, a notification popped up confirming the mission was complete. The session had lasted 8 hours and 20 minutes. While this was a significant improvement over the 10 hours they had spent at the start of the week, Choi Jung-hyuk knew it wasn't enough. He compared himself to Park Kang-ho, who was capable of defeating 10 C-Class sea monsters in a single hour. Sarah worried about his impatience, reminding him that he was consistently getting stronger by combining his abilities. Checking the system, he reviewed his new War Master skill, which had been created by fusing Perfect Defender and Perfect Attacker. After a week of testing, he realized that combined abilities were either reborn as something new or merged entirely. Shrugging off the technical details, he informed Sarah that a gate had suddenly opened in Anyangdong. He emphasized that their priority was to drastically reduce their hunting time to prepare for what was coming, an order the Valkyrie understood perfectly. Shortly after, he received a call from Jang Ta-woo at the detective agency, who was waiting outside the building. They met for coffee to discuss the case, where Ta-woo brought up a serious issue regarding outlaw awakeners settled in the dangerous red zone. He explained that these bandits were mostly first awakeners who were kidnapping and enslaving ordinary people. The protagonist struggled to see the connection between the missing girl and the current investigation. Jang Ta-woo offered a grim theory. Park Ji-young and her family might have been captured and enslaved by outlaws living in Samseong-dong, an area recently reclassified as a red zone. Choi Jung-hyuk was shocked by this possibility and asked for the reasoning behind such a suspicion. The detective explained that while nothing was absolutely certain, an informant had reported spotting a bandit group hiding in that neighborhood just the day before. Although he didn't have the exact coordinates yet, Ta-woo was confident he would secure the location soon as he continued his investigation. Handing the family photo back to the client, the detective watched as Jung-hyuk's eyes inevitably drifted toward Park Ji-young's face. By the time the protagonist returned home, night had fallen over the city. His mood instantly improved the moment he saw his younger siblings. When they told him they had spent the entire afternoon studying, he praised them, promising that they deserved a reward for their hard work. Meanwhile, a woman announced that she was preparing dinner and would serve it shortly. When the food arrived, Jung-hyuk was impressed by the generous spread she had put together. During the meal, he asked Unchol for his thoughts on the new nanny. The boy replied that he liked her very much, noting that she kept the house spotless and cooked delicious meals. Yeonjung added to the praise, mentioning that the employee also helped with their studies and took time to play with them. The hero was surprised, having been unaware of just how many tasks the nanny was handling. When it was time for her to head home, the nanny asked if there was anything else he needed before she left. Since it was Ms. Jae's last day, Jung-hyuk studied her for a moment in silence before asking if she would be interested in extending her contract. She smiled gently and replied that she would love to be hired as a regular employee. Delighted by her answer, he immediately accepted the proposal. Although the association president had handled the initial hiring, Jung-hyuk noted that she was younger than he had expected. She explained that she turned to childcare because decent jobs were hard to find and her family was struggling financially. However, she also hinted at personal reasons for taking the position. When the hero seemed confused about her true intentions, she revealed the connection. Her older sister was the mall employee who had looked after his siblings during the previous incident. She expressed her deep gratitude for the protection he had provided that day, explaining that her sister and mother were the only family she had left. Finally, the protagonist understood the real motivation behind her dedication. 2 weeks prior, she had realized the young man's identity after receiving a call from her former workplace. That connection allowed her to explain the situation and reach out to the boss directly. Visibly nervous, she asked if this history posed a problem, hastily adding that she was fully confident in her ability to handle all the required tasks. She began to ramble, pleading for a vote of confidence and insisting she would take excellent care of the children. However, the protagonist remained unconcerned by her anxiety and simply decided to move the conversation forward to discuss the contract details. The scene shifted to the headquarters of the Merai Group, a giant in the Korean business world known as Greg 6. Inside a conference room, men in suits were deep in negotiation. Kim Do-sung, the group's commander and son of Kim Mei-jin, highlighted his father's decision to launch a guild. This ambitious project had been entrusted to him, and he was determined to exceed his father's expectations by recruiting influential figures. The team understood that they needed powerful hunters on the level of Lee Da-soo, Kim Yoo-ho, or Kang Ji-yeon. However, securing such talent would be difficult since most famous names were already tied to major guilds. Uninterested in excuses, the executive demanded solutions, leaving the room in a thoughtful silence as everyone weighed the possibilities. Breaking the silence, Supervisor Hwang Chae-sung asked for permission to speak. Kim Do-sung immediately encouraged the young man to share his opinion. Hwang claimed to know of a highly recommended individual who rivaled the powerful names they had just discussed. Intrigued, the executive listened as Hwang, with a determined look, proposed a name familiar to everyone: the irregular, Choi Jung-ik. Kim Do-sung was pleased with the suggestion, recognizing the immense publicity benefits of recruiting the hero who had successfully battled 5 high-ranking monsters. Standing up, he praised the young supervisor's strategic thinking. He then began to criticize the older executives for lacking the brilliance that Hwang possessed, slamming his hand on the table to demand their attention. The executive pointed out a potential hurdle. Jung-ik likely had a restrictive contract with the association that prevented him from joining guilds. Hwang acknowledged this, explaining that this specific obstacle was exactly why the major guilds had given up on him. Despite the challenges and opposing views, Hwang insisted it was possible and was willing to take the risk. Impressed by the determination in the supervisor's eyes, the executive agreed, and the meeting shifted focus to determining the best strategy for recruiting Choi Jung-ik. The situation in the upper zone of the Ilsan hunting field was terrifying. A massive green monster suddenly emerged, scanning the area for a victim with a fierce, fearless gaze. Jung-ik, who had been looking for a target nearby, watched as the aberration leaped toward him like a ticking bomb. Sensing the enemy's eyes on him through the dust, he immediately drew his sword and summoned the Valkyrie. Seizing the chance to test their training, Sarah materialized and charged into battle, using her shield to deliver a powerful blow to the creature's face. As the monster stumbled, losing its balance, Choi Jung-ik activated his lightning flash ability to teleport behind the unsuspecting brute. Simultaneously, Sarah floated into position on the other side, surrounding the enemy. Together, they unleashed a coordinated mountain split attack against the creature's sturdy body. The battle concluded in exactly 3 minutes and 40 seconds, confirming that their combined power and efficiency had improved significantly. Just as they began to relax, a strange energy manifested in the air. Although the protagonist didn't initially recognize it, Sarah identified the phenomenon as a treasure dungeon gate. She explained that she had explored one previously with Park Kang-ho, which was how they had obtained the rare strength weapon and booster Jung-ik currently used. Recognizing the rarity of the event, they decided to seize the opportunity and stepped through the portal before it could vanish. They emerged into a narrow corridor that formed part of a labyrinth. Jung-ik navigated calmly using his map ability, grateful for the guidance. Although Sarah worried she might be useless in this environment, Jung-ik assured her that her presence alone was a great help. He pulled up the system information, which described the dungeon as a storage vault for artifacts and abilities left behind by powerful beings from a destroyed planet. Suspecting that such a place would have a security system, he suddenly spotted something odd and ordered Sarah to freeze. He realized that the ordinary-looking floor concealed a pitfall trap, though he noted that identifying every trapped tile individually wouldn't be necessary. Using his powerful weapon to clear the path, the protagonist smashed the floor ahead of them, causing the debris to tumble into a dark, bottomless pit. This revealed which tiles were solid, allowing the pair to cross safely while checking their position on the map. As they ventured deeper into the labyrinth, Junhyuk had to block a sudden arrow strike with his shield. The dangers continued in the next room, where they found themselves fleeing from a massive rolling cement sphere as the layout of the maze shifted around them. Eventually, they found a treasure chest containing 2 skill enhancement stones and a dungeon gate generator. They pressed on side by side, with the Valkyrie using her levitation abilities to shield her master from a green slime attack. After navigating the vast network of corridors, they entered a room that felt distinct from the others. It was unusually spacious and appeared to be free of traps. However, instead of a chest, the only item present was a book. When Junhyuk reached out to grab it, A sudden electric shock repelled his hand, accompanied by a warning that he didn't meet the requirements. As the warrior stood there in confusion, a green figure emerged from the shadows. It was Jade, the Golden Goblin, who immediately recognized Sarah from a previous visit with a former user, leaving the Valkyrie stunned by the reunion. Junyuk asked if killing the creature would allow him to obtain the book, but Jade simply laughed. He explained that his death would offer no reward. Instead, he simply needed to grant permission for Junyuk to take the item. The goblin revealed that his true mission was to assist the second original user of the system in evolving as quickly as possible. When the hero expressed confusion over how the creature knew so much, Jade smiled and clarified that while anyone could enter the dungeon, only the second user could meet him. Junyuk realized this was no ordinary goblin when Jade revealed he was created by the previous master using the power of creation, a statement that left the protagonist intensely curious about the secrets involved. The creature explained that those questions had no answers yet. The protagonist would have to discover the truth on his own. Dropping the subject, Junyuk returned to his request for the book, but the goblin stopped him to present a choice first. Pulling 2 bags from its clothes, the Golden Goblin held one in each hand, explaining that the boy had to select his reward before opening the treasure. The first option offered a choice of 2 out of 5 legendary skills, while the second bag contained one of the 3 main abilities wielded by the previous user. Junyuk realized that since the system transfer between users was complete, he finally had legitimate access to Park Kang-ho's powers. However, Sarah looked worried and warned her new master that Park Kang-ho had never trusted the Golden Goblin, advising him to be cautious to avoid falling into a trap. A strange silence filled the massive room. Noticing the boy's hesitation, the goblin suggested he stick with the legendary abilities. Nervous, Junyuk asked if the previous user had ever taken advantage of these benefits. The creature clarified that Park Kang-ho had relied solely on his own strength, accepting no help from the system. When the boy inquired about the conditions for activating the treasure, he learned that it required the second awakening of the second original user. This revelation made Junyuk realize why Kichul had never mentioned this feature. He had died before reaching that stage. Smiling, the creature asked if there were any further questions before pushing the young man to make his final decision. He stood between the legendary skills and the power of his predecessor. Without any further deliberation, the boy made up his mind and firmly pointed to the bag containing the previous user's abilities. The goblin appeared confused, as it had clearly wanted him to pick the other option, considering Park Kang-ho's skills to be far more significant. Despite its surprise, the creature accepted the choice without argument and displayed the list of abilities. The pages of the book began to turn on their own, overflowing with energy. When Junyuk examined the system, he was initially puzzled by the skill Descent of the Giant. He discovered it was a transformation ability requiring a crystal record that allowed the user to grow in size and strength to match a monster. With the correct records, this power could be shared with 8 completely trustworthy allies, allowing the team to become giants capable of crushing their enemies. Although he kept his expression neutral, the boy realized the item he had obtained was incredibly useful. As energy began to swirl around the area, he and his companion wasted no time in bidding the goblin farewell and stepping through the portal. Before they vanished, the creature expressed a wish for the young man's continued growth, predicting that one day he would be ready to understand the power of creation and finally become complete. Night had fallen by the time Choi Jung-yuk sat down for a quiet dinner with his siblings. As they ate the meal prepared by the nanny, his mind drifted back to the recent events and the suspicious goblin. He couldn't shake the feeling that the creature was untrustworthy. His sister eventually noticed his distraction, prompting him to snap back to reality and rejoin the conversation. The topic at hand was a request to visit the amusement park that week, specifically with Jae-hee tagging along. The girls lit up at the idea of the nanny joining them, and An Cheol agreed enthusiastically, as he was quite fond of her. Jung-yuk voiced concern about taking up her free weekends, but Jae-hee insisted she didn't mind. She assured him that she wasn't tired and actually enjoyed spending her days off at such places. Her willingness to go delighted the children, who clearly adored the attention she gave them. Meanwhile, lights remained on in a corporate office where Kim Do-sung, the president of the Merai Group, played a calm round of golf with his son. The younger man, who was leading a guild creation project, listened to his father's tips, but struggled with his game, missing the hole. Despite the late hour, the son sought his father's advice. Sensing that his son wasn't just distracted by the game, the executive listened as the young man explained that his recruitment target was an irregular, currently with the association. Kim Do-song advised him that it was smarter to assess the situation carefully and ask for assistance rather than acting recklessly. Realizing that the main hurdle to recruiting Choi Jun-hyuk was his existing contract, the older man decided he would need to arrange a lunch meeting with the association president. He then raised his golf club and issued a stern ultimatum. His son must do whatever it took to succeed, or he would be forced to step down immediately. Later, at the Seoul Jamsil Joy World, the atmosphere was far more cheerful. Jade walked through the crowds holding hands with Yoonjung and Yeomchul, while Choi Jun-hyuk walked alongside them, ready to enjoy the day. Yoonchul was buzzing with excitement at the prospect of going on the rides. When the nanny asked which attraction he wanted to visit first, his eyes lit up as he immediately suggested the roller coaster. Meanwhile, the girl took a moment to scan the park before deciding that she would prefer to ride the Viking ship. Finally, Jade turned to Jun-hyuk to ask for his preference. Caught off guard, he hurriedly blurted out the gyro drop. Hearing this, Yoonchul immediately changed his mind, abandoning the roller coaster idea to join his older brother on the drop tower. Jun-hyuk quickly reassured them that there was no need to compromise. They would have plenty of time to experience every ride they wanted. The boy was thrilled by the promise of a full day of fun. Although the nanny worried that the hunter might be pushing himself too hard, he dismissed the concern. After being focused solely on work for so long, he was simply happy to bridge the gap and spend time with his siblings. Suddenly, their attention was drawn to a group of men in suits approaching them. The protagonist was initially confused by the heavy security detail, realizing it must signal the presence of a VIP. Jaegi quickly identified the central figure as Lee Byung-hun, the eldest son of the Shinsun Group, the most powerful business conglomerate in Korea. Recognizing the face, the protagonist realized this was the man destined to completely shake up the country in the future. Nearby, a figure in a giant bear costume received a directive. The mission was to infiltrate the park and eliminate the target, along with his son and 5 bodyguards. Trying to blend in with the crowd, the bear acted naturally while secretly scanning for threats. Unaware of the danger, Choi Jun-hyuk went to buy 4 tickets, 2 for adults and 2 for children. The park was massive, filled with elaborate attractions. On the roller coaster, the experience was vastly different for the 2 generations. While the children had a blast, the adults were terrified and unable to relax. The dynamic remained the same on the gigantic Viking ship, with the kids loving every second while the protagonist felt his energy draining away. Next, they moved to the drop tower. Yoonjong and Eun-chul couldn't hide their joy, but the adults continued to suffer through the ride, looking visibly scared. As crowds wandered in every direction, the group decided to take a break to refuel. The sight of chicken and churros made them eager to eat, so Jae ordered the food she knew the children loved. Meanwhile, the older brother seized the opportunity to sit down and rest, completely exhausted from the day's activities. Soon after, Jun-hyuk noticed that the bodyguards were no longer hovering around the VIPs. Instead, the father sat on a bench, buried in a newspaper, and completely ignoring his curious son. This irritated Jun-hyuk because the security team was standing right next to him, making the situation uncomfortable and crowded. Suddenly, he sensed a strange tension in the air. Confused, he looked around to investigate, but the food court appeared peaceful, with Yoon-chul happily munching on a churro. However, Jun-hyuk noted that the people previously wearing the bear and cat costumes had disappeared. High atop a nearby building, 2 figures observed the scene through binoculars to ensure their investigation was accurate. They realized that their target was sitting beside the irregular, Choi Jun-hyuk. One of the observers pointed out that his partner seemed unaware of the hunter's true power, marking his presence as an unexpected variable that could ruin their plans. Since Jun-hyuk appeared unrelated to the target, they decided not to alter the operation, though they agreed to stay alert. Orders were quickly issued. Yellow and blue were to keep watch, while green handled the bodyguards. Finally, black and purple were assigned the specific task of eliminating the target. Back in the food court, Yoon-chul was enjoying his chicken when he noticed a lonely boy, likely his own age, sitting by himself at a nearby table. After the 2 exchanged a silent glance, Yoon-chul extended his hand to offer a piece of chicken, telling the stranger that it was delicious and crispy. Although he usually preferred eating everything himself, he felt willing to share this time. The boy seemed hesitant to accept the food, and before he could react, the bodyguard stepped in aggressively. One of the men warned that offering food or even speaking to the young master was strictly forbidden. Embarrassed, the child apologized for the intrusion. Witnessing the men scolding his brother, Young-hyuk stood up immediately. He was losing his patience, unable to believe that these men in suits had the audacity to frighten children. One of the bodyguards took offense at the informal tone the man used, but the executive quickly stepped in to diffuse the tension, explaining that it was a normal interaction. Introducing himself as Lee Byung-hoo, he apologized for his security team's behavior. Choi Jung-hyuk returned the greeting, noting immediately that the executive was not an awakened. Lee then instructed his son Sang-woo to say hello, and the boy obediently offered a respectful bow. When Eunchul invited Sang-woo to sit and share their chicken, the father accepted the offer with a faint smile, surprising the protagonist with his friendliness. The children gathered at the table with the nanny to share the meal. Lee Byung-hoo remarked that his son usually followed a strict, balanced diet prepared by chefs flown in from China and the United States once a month, which meant he rarely ate junk food. The hero simply smiled at this casual display of wealth and power. However, the conversation took an awkward turn when Lee assumed the nanny was Jun-hyuk's wife and that the children were their offspring. Choking on his drink in surprise, the protagonist hurriedly clarified the misunderstanding, explaining that the kids were his younger siblings, and the woman with long hair was merely an employee. Although the executive found it odd for a man to bring a nanny to an amusement park, he accepted the situation after learning how fond the siblings were of her. Flashing a somewhat irritating smile, Lee noticed it was getting late and told his son it was time to go. Sang-woo, who had been enjoying both the food and his new friends, looked disappointed. As they prepared to leave, Eunchul suggested they meet up to play again someday. Sang-woo agreed and followed his father toward the exit, unaware that criminals were tracking their every move. Noticing his son's somber mood, Lee asked if he was having trouble making friends at school. With a sad expression, the boy admitted he couldn't tell if his friends were real or just interested in him because he was the grandson of the Shinsun Group. His father dismissed these concerns, lecturing him on social hierarchies and cynically stating that friendship was merely an illusion. Suddenly, a masked man in a black jumpsuit approached them, brandishing a sharp sword. Sang-woo spotted the threat and pointed him out to his father, just as more armed thugs emerged from the left and right. Realizing they were being ambushed, a desperate Lee called out to Kim, his security chief. Kim and the bodyguards instantly drew their weapons, determined to protect their boss as the enemies closed in from all sides. The cold, emotionless expressions on the assassins' faces made their lethal intent undeniable. Terrified, Sang-woo clung tightly to his father's legs, seeking safety. However, Lee Byung-hoo was unable to reassure his son, his eyes filled with despair as he realized the gravity of their situation. Meanwhile, unaware of the danger, the protagonist's family was finishing their lunch. An Cheol was absolutely stuffed, convinced that the chicken he had just eaten was the best food on the planet. He announced his intention to go play with Sang-woo again, but his brother stopped him. Jun-hyuk explained that Sang-woo needed to spend quality time with his father since they hadn't seen each other in a while. The boy seemed to accept this reasoning and calmed down. Suddenly, a loud noise shattered the peace, instantly alarming everyone. Panic swept through the park as crowds began to flee, screaming about a murder. Ja-hee looked around in confusion, struggling to understand the chaos, while Choi Jun-hyuk instinctively scanned the area for threats. He quickly decided that their best course of action was to evacuate the amusement park immediately. An Cheol, perhaps too full to run, begged his brother to use his super strength to take down the villains. Jun-hyuk refused, insisting that the police would handle the situation and that he didn't need to get involved. Despite his refusal, the child persisted. Ja-hee stepped in and agreed with the boy, urging her boss to protect the innocent people just until the authorities arrived. She reassured him that she would keep Yeon-jong and Yeon-cheol safe while he acted. Nearby, the security detail was collapsing, with guards falling one by one. Chief Kim, though trembling, remained determined to protect his employer, his eyes burning with suppressed rage. Noticing the different colored fabrics worn by the attackers, he realized they were the infamous Rainbow Group. He was baffled, however, asking why they were targeting a CEO when they typically hunted powerful awakened beings. The agent dressed in black scoffed, clarifying that it was simply a lie that they only targeted the awakened. They had just never received a request to kill a normal human before. The assassins then launched a coordinated double attack, striking Kim down. As the bodyguard hit the ground, the killer declared that they didn't discriminate when it came to murder contracts. Realizing that someone had specifically hired them for this assassination, the executive watched in horror. Without mercy, the assassin stomped on the bodyguard's head and raised his weapon, ready to end the man's life. Realizing there was no escape, the boy clung to his father just as the blade swept down toward his head. In a split second, Jun-hyuk leaped into the fray, positioning himself between the victims and the assassin to prevent the tragedy. He had felt something was off ever since he first met the pair, but Sang-woo looked thrilled to be saved by a real hero. The agent in black realized they were now facing a significant problem. As a weapon materialized in his hands, he reported Jun-hyuk's interference to his team. Watching the scene unfold, the CEO finally understood that the man he had been speaking with was actually the famous Irregular. Jun-hyuk made it clear that his only reason for stepping in was to protect the child, and he ordered the father and son to find a safe hiding spot immediately. Seeing them attempt to flee, the bandit in red charged toward them. However, Jun-hyuk spotted the move instantly. He intercepted the attacker with a powerful blow while shouting for the civilians to run as fast as possible. With the first threat neutralized, 4 enemies remained. Smiling, the protagonist cracked a joke, telling them not to run away, and mocked their group name, Rainbow, pointing out that their colors didn't even match. Increasingly irritated, the black-clad leader demanded to know why the young man was interfering in matters that didn't concern him. Jun-hyuk simply replied that he had a strong sense of justice. He then began to display his true power, causing a shield to manifest in the center of the amusement park. He activated his copy ability, sending light coursing through the bandits' bodies. When the system interface appeared showing his new acquisitions, Jun-hyuk was confused. The abilities possessed by the leader felt strangely familiar. After a moment of reflection, he concluded that the man in black was likely the person he had been searching for all along. The group launched a coordinated assault, with Yellow and Purple attempting a powerful double attack. However, the protagonist was too fast. He dodged both strikes and launched himself into the air. Catching them off guard, he kicked one opponent in the face, used the momentum to spin around, and struck the second bandit who hadn't expected the follow-up. Now only 2 enemies remained. Seeing Yellow on the ground, the green bandit looked completely bewildered. Adopting a menacing tone, Jun-hyuk remarked that they were lucky he wasn't holding a weapon. He noted that if he were armed, they would have already lost their heads and wouldn't be alive to tell the tale. Admitting that he was somewhat unprepared because he had only intended to enjoy a day out with his siblings, the protagonist decided not to kill the bandits. Instead, Choi Jun-hyuk offered them a simple ultimatum. They could either continue the fight against him or collect their fallen comrades and leave. This presented the group with a difficult dilemma. As a trembling Purple struggled to stand, Black warned him not to trust the man's offer. Green agreed, arguing that retreating would destroy their credibility and that they should keep fighting. However, Jun-hyuk bluntly pointed out that they couldn't handle him, making victory impossible. Realizing the truth in those words, Black decided to abandon the mission and ordered a retreat, silencing any further debate. Although Green was clearly unhappy with the command, the captain insisted that everyone follow his orders. Smiling, the protagonist watched as he secured his victory without further bloodshed. As the men helped each other up amidst intense stares, Black turned away, promising no tricks but expressing a strong desire that their paths never cross again. Moments later, a frantic Lee Byung-hoo rushed over, arguing that letting the assassins escape was a mistake. He criticized the boy's judgment, but Jun-hyuk countered that forcing a fight to the death would have caused widespread destruction, endangering innocent civilians. He wagered that such collateral damage was not something the executive would have wanted. Suddenly, more guards arrived, anxious about their master's safety and claiming they had come as fast as they could. Lee Byung-hoo was furious at their tardiness, and an elderly guard apologized profusely, acknowledging that their delay could have resulted in a catastrophe where both the executive and his son might have died. When Lee turned to point out the man who had saved them, he found the spot empty. The hero had already vanished into the park. The following day brought sunny skies with only a few clouds. Back at home, Jun-hyuk found himself deep in thought about the Rainbow Group. He realized he actually recognized the man called Black, which left him puzzled about their motives, as they didn't seem to fit the profile of typical villains. Reflecting on his past memories, Jun-hyuk recalled earning rewards but remaining clueless about when the next gates would manifest. So far, there had been no signs of new activity. His thoughts were interrupted by a call from Xiulin, which he answered instantly. His friend asked if he was free, suggesting they meet up to share a few drinks and catch up on life. Before long, the table was cluttered with empty bottles as the 2 men sat face to face, trading updates. However, Jun-hyuk noticed that Xiulin was drinking heavily and seemed visibly depressed, prompting him to ask if everything was okay. After struggling to find the right words, Xiulin finally revealed that his guild was merging with another organization, a negotiation process that had dragged on for quite some time. He explained that while hunters with a second awakening or higher were being rehired with better terms, First Awakening hunters like himself were facing pay cuts and reduced conditions. It was clear the management was trying to slash personnel costs, as they had given him an ultimatum. accept the new measures or have his contract terminated. Visibly irritated, Xiulin crushed the can in his hand, stating that he would focus on team hunts while searching for a new guild, feeling that they had treated him like trash. Realizing that this meetup was actually a venting session, Jun-hyuk listened as his friend admitted he needed strong alcohol and a listener. The protagonist smiled and steered the conversation in a new direction, telling him to stop worrying and simply join his mercenary group. Xiulin realized Jun-hyuk was referring to the team he had created himself. Jun-hyuk confessed that Xiulin had always been his #1 recruit, but he had previously held back out of respect for the other guild. Although Xiulin initially seemed hesitant and found the situation a bit awkward, Jun-hyuk assured him that despite official titles like leader and vice leader, he wouldn't need to act any differently. Eventually, Xiulin agreed to the request, though he jokingly warned Jun-hyuk not to start acting like a boss, adding that he would only respond to orders with ironic submissiveness. As Jun-hyuk laughed at the comment, a valuable object on the table suddenly began to glow intensely. Startled by the bright light, the protagonist focused on the item while Xiulin noticed a strange noise coming from the distance. The object was finally emitting a powerful signal, indicating that a gate had appeared in the vicinity. Checking the system, Jun-hyuk realized that 3 dungeons of different ranks had actually spawned. He noted that they were set to activate in 3 days, meaning that even if he chose to enter one immediately, 2 would still remain available. He wasted no time summoning the Valkyrie, and she answered his call immediately. Looking over the available dungeon options, ranked F, E, and D, he weighed his choices, though he felt confident he could easily clear any of them. Sarah recommended setting up a scenario where 2 First Awakening users could play an active role. With that in mind, he determined that the highest rank was the best choice, primarily because it offered slightly superior rewards. Meanwhile, observing his friend talking to thin air, Xiulin assumed the man was completely drunk. Ignoring the awkward stare, the protagonist made a phone call to Chang-su, ordering his subordinate to come to the office right away for an urgent matter. The atmosphere was calm when Chang-su arrived, ready to hear the news. The boss announced that effective immediately, Xiulin was officially joining their mercenary group. Both men seemed thrilled by the update, happy to become co-workers. Chang-su then tried to steer the conversation back to the urgent issue the boss had mentioned earlier, but he was told that was a separate matter entirely. With a simple command, the protagonist made the Valkyrie materialize in the room. The sudden appearance of Sarah, looking magnificent and imposing in her attire, left the men petrified. He declared that she would serve as the vice leader of the group from now on. Smiling, she thanked her master and introduced herself to the team. Once the initial shock wore off, the men were completely captivated by her beauty. Chang-su, who used to consider Kang Ji-yeon the most beautiful woman he knew, instantly decided she meant nothing compared to Sarah. Xiulin laughed as he tried to restrain his love-struck colleague. Suddenly, Choi Jun-hip turned serious, revealing he had a strictly confidential secret to share. To their astonishment, he confessed that he wasn't actually a tanker. Despite their shock, he confirmed the details, explaining that many people referred to him as an irregular because he differed from standard awakened individuals. He was essentially a multi-class user. While he originally wielded tanker and dealer skills, his second awakening had unlocked a much wider range of abilities. Chang-su was deeply impressed by the irregular's capabilities, while Xiulin tried to calm the boy down, eager to hear the rest. The protagonist explained that he was sharing this information because he wanted to take them somewhere. He viewed them as family and believed it would be satisfying for the group to grow together. When a confused Chang-su asked where they were going, the hero opened the system, causing a portal to appear in the room. Their destination was the rank D dungeon. Choi Jun-hyuk wasted no time initiating the process. As he made his choice, a brilliant red light flooded the room, and swirling energy coalesced to form a gateway. His 2 subordinates looked on in desperate confusion, unable to comprehend the sudden supernatural event. Jun-hyuk briefly explained that this was a dungeon gate, and that he would lead the way, expecting them to follow. Panic set in for the 2 men who couldn't believe their eyes. They pleaded with their boss to wait and explain the situation more calmly. Sweat ran down Xiulin's face as his nervousness peaked, but it was too late. Jun-hyuk and Sarah had already stepped through the portal and entered the dungeon. Inside, a system notification confirmed that the second original user had arrived, triggering a significant increase in the available rewards. Observing the environment, Sarah realized that her master was unfamiliar with the red orcs inhabiting the area. She launched into a brief explanation, noting that these monsters were originally from her world and were considered the worst creatures encountered during the war against the demons. She cautioned that while they might not be strong enough to threaten him directly, anyone else nearby needed to exercise extreme caution.